underwater just.
All right. Well, good evening and welcome everybody to our work session for May 11th, 2020 at 4:30. I note that I think we have one council member arriving. The rest of us are in attendance. As we call this meeting to order, we have two discussion items: overview of our economic development practices during COVID-19 with Micah Miranda, and a discussion and council direction regarding Chandler facilities reopening and return to service plan. So with that, let me turn this over to City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Council, I know there's been some discussion around everything that economic development has been doing over the course of the last several weeks. I will note that we are all definitely aware of the financial implications that COVID has brought to a number of our businesses. And so with that, I'm going to get Micah Miranda, our Economic Development Director, to come up and give you a presentation on what they have been doing in economic development.
Decided Mr. Miranda likes a good presentation, the long walk down. After
Yeah,
his name
dramatic entry, right? You guys getting the screen?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me this evening. Really excited to give you a debrief on what we've been up to, not just from the Economic Development Office, but citywide. You've often heard me say economic development is the ultimate team sport. So it takes a lot of partners and internal stakeholders and external stakeholders to really support our business community. So you may remember, it wasn't too long ago where we came before you and presented our economic development strategic plan, which you approved late last fall. And it really had 8 core elements, as you see before you. This is what staff's been working on. There are a lot of items here that cover a real breadth of material. And what's interesting about this is this doesn't stop. Economic development doesn't stop in the traditional sense just because of our current climate around the COVID scare. So we're going to go into deeper detail on some of these moving forward, but this is who we are. This is the direction council gave us, and this is the path we've been headed on since we got this direction from council last fall. Simultaneous to this, we have another little parallel track called COVID-19 that we've been having to manage. And it's really been the role of triage and staying out in front of the issues as they approach us. Now, that being said, there are intricacies in every one of these items, but the idea that we're slowing down, not moving forward, or thinking to the future is not in the city's vision, it's not in the staff's vision. You know, we understand Mayor and Council has a very clear vision of where you would like to see the city go, and that's where we're continuing to take us with the activities we've been working on. So, kind of taking a look at the different asset classes. Industrial and office have been the least impacted. Early on, we started outreach calls to our recent business locates, expansions, to kind of get a sense of where they're going. Majority of our projects that we work on are in the office and industrial sector. They were doing good then. As of last week, even this morning, they're still feeling pretty bullish about what's going on. You know, a lot of them have had to re-pivot how they're going about their business, but a lot of these industrial partners we have are continuing to invest. A lot of them are continuing to hire. Our office stakeholders are doing something different. Obviously, because of social distancing, they are sending a lot of their employees home. And so as we think forward on the real estate side of this, a lot of people are speculating, okay, we're gonna need less office space now because everybody's gonna be working from home. We're kind of seeing the opposite start to take shape. And my gut is gonna tell me we're gonna see a net push in the amount of office space we're gonna need to work on. And from an ED perspective, whether it's on the office or industrial side, you hear we talk about product. Product wins projects. So simultaneous to working on the project side with individual companies, we're also working to maintain Chandler's presence with the office and industrial developers, knowing that people are still moving here. We have a good business climate as set forth by Mayor and Council, and we're continuing to press that. Now, as we get into the other two asset classes, retail and hospitality,
Vice Mayor.
So, Mike, a question on the office though. It was like thinking about that, it's a double shot, right? Some people will be working from home, so some offices may shrink, but those that do have offices aren't wanting to have more spacing, so they may grow. So, do you currently track a metric on office users? Again, the average footprint or the average square feet per person for an office user? Are we tracking that and see if maybe out of this though we do see another trend in maybe get less dense office space? So,
through the mayor, Vice Mayor Lopez. Yes, it's a metric we do keep our eye on quite often. It's too soon to tell. It'll be interesting to see if that jobs per square foot ratio, usually it's about 100 square feet per 100 to 150 square feet on the office side. As offices recently have increased to more density, like 6, 7 per 1,000, cramming people in there. Obviously, with social distancing, the need for space, that's going to decline. We're seeing a lot of traction in people going back to cubes or even modified office spaces. So it is a metric we're familiar with. We do keep an eye on it across industrial, warehouse, flex, office. So it is something we are going to continue to watch to see how it plays
interesting
out.
how that comes
Yeah.
out for next year. Yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you.
On the
Mayor.
retail side,
Mayor. So what's the vacancy rate with office right now compared to what it was a few months ago?
vacancy rate right now, Councilmember Orlando through the mayor, we're pretty flat still. I don't have the direct number on total vacancy, but where we're starting to see softening is in subleasing. Okay, so people who may have had 50,000 square feet saying, I'm not going to need all this space. I'm going to sublet 20% of my space out. So that's where we're seeing some of that capacity grow in available office. It isn't through direct leasing, it's through the sublease market.
Can you get that number for us, please? Can
We
you
had-
get that number for us, please?
Yeah, we can get that.
Thank you.
So on the retail side, this is the most visibly impacted. Restaurants, retail, bars, the businesses that depend on foot traffic. We are seeing decline. One of the best measurements of this is people paying rent. There's been a 60% reduction really across the board once we started tracking this in late March, late February, March, and April. As of the end of April, heading into May, about only 40% of tenants were starting to pay their retail rents. And that's been nationally. We saw it here anecdotally at first, and now we're hearing it directly from the large property managers. The hospitality side is where we've seen a lot of this decline. Chandler's in a unique position, as I mentioned at our last work session, where we're not overly impacted relative to luxury markets that are seeing 8% occupancy. A lot of our hotel occupancy is really in that 20% range. We have seen 2 of our larger properties completely remove themselves from room night generation. So while we are experiencing a reduced demand, we are also seeing less hotel beds on the market per night. So the retail and hospitality are definitely the most impacted sectors in Chandler at this time. That being said, projects.
Mayor. You want to get through this, don't you? No, just kidding. So go back on the retail. What's going on in the mall? And I guess my intent of this presentation was to not only know what Chandler doing, but to look best practice what other cities are doing or other communities around the nation are doing in order to keep small business as well as business in general going. So hopefully you'll touch on other communities. But let's just take the Chandler Mall for now. It's shut down. It may be open up at the end of this week. I'm hearing rumors. We've just lost a second major tenant. Again, what are we doing? What are we ensuring that there's a confidence level that we, if anything, could be doing working with those mall developers?
Through the mayor, Councilman Orlando, that's a really good question. And one of the things from the onset, the city, economic development staff, and really across the organization, we've been proactive in reaching out to these major stakeholders. So specific to Chandler Fashion Center, we've been coordinating with Macerich, who's the mall owner operator. Specific to Nordstrom's, we knew this was coming. We are already working a project for about 8 months now to backfill that space in anticipation of this building coming on the market. However, independent of that, we are also working with Macerich on communication with the governor's office and opening up the mall. There has been some concern that opening up a air-conditioned facility in hot months will encourage congregation of people, which could have negative impacts around the COVID. So the governor's office, as you mentioned, is going to be hopefully relaxing some of that. We've been advocating that with the governor's office and really pushing for Macerich and those other mall property owners to come up with best practices to ensure their guest safety. Independent of COVID, we've been in communication with Macerich around what does Chandler Fashion Center 2.0 look like? Again, being proactive, understanding the changing retail landscape. How Chandler Fashion was developed, how it is now, is not where it's going to be in 3 to 5 years. City understands that, Macerich understands that. So we're looking at alternative site plans, different ways that we could potentially reuse the mall space to be economically viable and continue to generate sales tax for the city.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor. Thank you. Thanks, Micah. So some of the vision for what that mall could be, I'm sure people that are watching, and I'm curious, what are some of those ideas that are coming forward?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Stewart, staff obviously has a lot of ideas. Ultimately, it'll be up to Macerich, and I don't want to speak for them too prematurely. However, it is really looking to make sure it's economically viable, sustainable, and a fortress property. So those large anchor tenants we know are evolving, but I really would hate to speculate on behalf of Macerich. All I know is we are in communication with them. They know that the mall is going to have to change, and I'm excited for the future of it. I think it was the last major traditional mall center to be developed, all interior. A lot of them have gone to the exterior. Mall concepts like Santan, to Councilmember Orlando's point, those are allowed to open right now because they don't have the enclosed confined spaces. And so I think there's going to be a natural evolution of how that space plays out. And it's really going to, from my perspective, look to be more of a 24/7 type of destination with a complete mix of uses, which we've really seen on the south side already with Viridian, Cambria, the apartments, and some of the other things that have gone there. I think it's really going to be more of a dynamic destination as opposed to a 8 or 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. type of location. I hate to speculate. I don't want to overstep what Macerich is looking to do, but.
Sure. And then I have one follow-up question. So you mentioned a 60% reduction in retail rents. So there's a lot of movement coming from revenue or funding coming down to landlords through PPP. There's also some speculation of rents relief that's being paid directly to the rent payer. Are you seeing, and maybe this is a question for Dawn, how is that affecting revenues overall? If we're a pretty commercial community, are you seeing the impact yet, or is that in delay?
Through the mayor, Councilmember
And
Stewart.
the revenues for the city, to be clear.
I know we're going to be delayed on it just because of the way the reporting occurs. So Dawn, correct me
Here she is.
if I'm wrong. We're about a month and a half out from getting the full March numbers.
Actually, we'll have March numbers.
This week.
Yeah, they'll go out in the packet on Wednesday.
So that'll be the first full month of March data. So
Through the mayor, Councilmember Stewart, the memo going out this week will be the first look at the impacts of COVID on our city budget. So it will reflect the sales made in March, reported in April, and then of course we're summarizing in the report at the beginning of May here. So it'll only show that half of March pretty much, but we'll get a feel of what the shutdown actually did to the city of Chandler. You're very welcome.
thanks.
Here. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. So when you talk about Mesa Ridge, you talk about we're working with them and trying to have a positive or good outcome from all of this. I guess the question is, what are we doing to message the governor's office? Are we, many of those businesses are small independents, and they own their business, and they own their leases. And so are we really sending a message to the governor saying, let's get this going?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Rowe, I know council has taken steps to share your guys' position
Yes.
with the governor's office, and I think that was another one of those leadership positions that the city of Chandler is really out there pushing to really explain to the governor's office that their decisions are impacting not only Chandler as a municipality, but also our local businesses. So that's one thing. And then also communication with our retail and restaurant associations. You got to remember we have a couple dozen organizations we work with from the Economic Development Office, NAOP, Restaurant Association, all these folks where we're talking to them, we're giving our input, and then they're taking that collective voice and messaging to the governor's office on the impacts of those decisions. So I do know that the city of Chandler is seen in that light. Some of the very public steps you all have taken have been well received. So on the staff level side, that's really a lot of the communication with ED staff, Arizona Commerce Authority, and then also through our intergov office.
So I guess that, we've got our steps 1, 2, and 3. So I guess as things are rolling out here, I guess I felt like the mall was part of that, and it doesn't sound like it is.
It is not. Through the mayor, Councilmember Rowe, the county is still hesitant to fully open up interior climate-controlled retail spaces due to the fact that they're afraid it's going to cause folks to bundle up and not follow social distancing guidelines. But it's something we continue to push back on and say, hey, our stakeholders, Macerich, all these retailers, they have plans in place. Apple knows how to do this. They've opened up in China. They've gone through the steps of reopening, not just in Asia, but also in other parts of the world. So there are precedents and best practices to follow. And these retailers, they know what they're doing. They're really sharp.
Like Costco and
Exactly, yes,
Fry's and all these other.
very much. So we're hoping this week the governor's office may provide some new direction around those
Well, I hope so too.
orders.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Orlando.
So I understand the opening and closing of the mall. That's not really, I mean, that's a short-term discussion, but I'm worried more about the long-term discussion.
Absolutely.
So how does this mall look? Again, have you looked at other communities out there around the United States? Have they looked at the communities? They given ideas? What are I need more specifics. I don't feel comfortable that, again, and I've talked to the Marsh folks over the last couple of days myself, and I know there's things they can't talk about, but I just don't feel comfortable that we have a plan, and can we say, well, there's a mall over in Austin that did this, and this is similar to what we're thinking of doing.
Through the mayor, Councilmember Orlando, from a staff perspective, we have taken steps to talk with, even before COVID. This is
Right, and
really
that's
right.
what I'm
right.
more worried about that.
Yeah, from the staff perspective, absolutely. We've actually had meetings with different organizations who have worked on repositioning the different malls around the country, specifically in oversaturated markets, traditional markets, Southern California, which is a good peer kind of comparison, very similar geographic layout, that type of stuff, to think about the visioning of retail in general. And obviously, due to the fact that Chandler Fashion is our largest retail location, that did come up as part of our conversation. But we have to have those conversations collaboratively with Macerich. I can't really look to say this is what we would like to see. So that's the dialogue we're having. But to answer your question, yes, we've been out there. We've been meeting with different folks who reposition properties. They run the economics, the finance. Where does the land value have to be? Where's the net new demand coming from? And also working with the management services department to get a historical look back on what does the mall generate from a revenue perspective? What types of new activities, product types will we have to introduce at certain, whether it's leasing levels, sales tax numbers, office rents, to maintain the revenue generation. So that's something that we're working with Don's team on. We've already pulled those numbers, and we're trying to get our arms around of, okay, if we want to continue to see the similar rates of growth from the mall, what do we need to backfill at a per square foot basis? And it's not a perfect science. There's a little bit of hesitation, obvious, not, I don't want to say hesitation, but our retail partners are being very diligent and patient in trying to figure out how they're going to reposition their properties. So to answer your question from a staff perspective, we are absolutely thinking about this. City manager's office has asked staff to take a look at this even before COVID arise, so we could be prepared, just because we knew the evolution of the mall is bound to happen.
I appreciate, one more last question, because I don't want, again, I don't want to drill down too much.
No, good questions.
So what's your time framing on some of these decision process, or at least a blueprint of where we want to go or how we want to get there? And I asked that obviously to get, again, confidence. It all boils, I mean, I've talked to, like many up here, talked to small business owners from Tempe, Mesa, Chandler, obviously, Phoenix. And the one word they keep saying is confidence, trust, to get those folks to come back into their business, whether they're selling furniture or a restaurant or a coffee shop. So I think the more we have, again, just speculating here, the more we have a solidified plan or some thoughts on how we could do not only this, but Four Corners, retail in general, because that's the brick and mortar, then that confidence will help from the business side of the house as well as be enthusiastic from the consumer side of the house.
Through the mayor, Councilman Orlando, that gets to the crux of our economic conundrum. We have a consumption-based issue where we've asked people to stay home, not go out and interact, and that message has been communicated over and over and beaten people's minds. How can we go about working with our stakeholders, businesses and residents to push the Shop Chandler message? We have really seen a dramatic increase in online retail sales, which I mentioned at our last presentation. It's now going to be incumbent upon Chandler residents and businesses and us as leaders to communicate to our general public that that is well and good, but we need to get out there and support our brick and mortar neighbors. That's really where the rubber is going to hit the road. And you know, from the economic development and tourism side, we've got some things that we're going to be pushing from a communication messages, reallocation of resources in this next budget cycle. And that's really going to be incumbent upon everybody. I mean, we're all going to have to, I'm not going to order XYZ from Amazon. I'm going to go down to the local store and make this purchase. And so it's going to be a collective mind shift, but it's going to be through proactive communication from the city of Chandler to really lead that.
Thank you, Mayor.
Proceed.
All right, business project pipeline. Projects are moving forward. Office industrial projects are still on the books. But these projects, as you all know, don't happen overnight. By the time somebody shows up for a ribbon cutting, there's usually 24 months at least worth of work on the front end, whether it's through the site selection or just through the design and construction timeline. We have to make sure our pipeline is filled. So we haven't stopped some of our marketing and other efforts around business attraction, because without that, we stop. So we're planting the seeds now during COVID for all these other attraction retention projects. So we're just as strong down the line as we are today in March or in December before this all happened. So our work hasn't stopped. We cannot stop selling Chandler. You've all heard me say there's 20,000 other locations across the city, across the country for businesses to invest. It's our job in the economic development shop to stay in front of these folks and let them know we're the preferred destination for capital investment. So what does that pipeline look like? This is a sampling of our largest projects over the past 120 days. They're substantial. You know, when we put these RFP responses together, they take days, and it's reams of paper, and we get it back out to our partners at ACA or GPEC or independent site selectors that have contacted us. So projects are moving forward. Chandler is on the radar. That's our job, is to make sure we have enough projects coming into our funnel. So 12 to 24 months from now, you're going to start seeing ribbon cuttings and all that good stuff occur. And we're going to continue to maintain our economic trajectory. But we also had a lot of good news. I think a lot of this was overshadowed during the whole COVID-19 onset. In economic development, we generally focus our efforts on base industries. Those are jobs Those are projects that bring new wealth into the city, new payroll, new capital expenses that then circulate. So they support the mom and pop businesses, to Councilmember Orlando's question. So if we're able to bring in Clarivate Analytics, 150 new jobs that was announced in February at the Mayor's State of the City address. That dollars then comes into our economy. They go to Santan, they go to Uptown to shop, they're at the mall. That's really where we look to drive a lot of economic activities through those base industries. So we had Clarivate, Root Insurance be adding 480 jobs. That was announced in March. FinTech Insurance Company. If anybody doesn't know what that is, that's a wheel of cheese. It's Project Asiago. We were on a cheese naming spree for a while for some of our projects. Yet to be announced, healthcare company that's taking 100,000 square feet and up to 600 jobs. Hopefully we'll be getting an announcement out on that soon, but there's good activity, there's good momentum. Things are happening on the base industry side. Retention expansion is often the overlooked part of economic development. Everybody wants to focus on attraction. It's the sexy thing, but the ED team is seen as a resource for companies, whether they're looking to expand, they're looking to relocate. Our job is to make sure they don't leave and go to another state or a peer community in the region, or to make sure that their expansion that takes place in Chandler is as smooth as possible. All obstacles are removed, and we've had a number of really good projects this past quarter around retention. On the marketing side, this goes back to staying in front of folks. So LinkedIn, Twitter, a lot of our social media, people in Chandler will never see. We've talked about this before. We really target those influencers, those decision makers across the country and across the globe as to what's going on. And what's interesting from my perspective is the posts that gain the most traction have to do with our financial stability. We put things out there in LA, Boston, Chicago, Philadelphia. Where we get the most traction is when we talk about our AAA bond rating as a major pillar of who we are in fiscal sustainability. So we're continuing to push that messaging across the country. So when businesses are looking to expand, whether it's for organic growth or they're looking to flee high-cost locations, Chandler's a destination in mind, and that's a message we continue to pound. On the tourism side, the tourism office has been really busy. As I said earlier, the hospitality sector was hit pretty hard. It is part of our economic development strategy to have a robust tourism industry that really focuses on business travel. Well, that was cut. And so tourism really shifted a lot of their time and efforts to help support those small mom and pop curbside business or restaurants that, there's a meeting or conference in. They're going to those restaurants. So really changing how we've been advertising to Councilmember Orlando's point, to be a much more in-market, okay, you don't need to advertise in DC anymore for small meeting events. We're gonna get you to advertise here in Chandler, and we're gonna get Chandler residents to go to Parlay, go to these other restaurants and support them locally. That being said, meeting and events will come back. Last week, we met with 16 meeting planners, telling them about Chandler, the hotels, opportunities, ease of access, why they should be here. That stuff also doesn't stop. We have to continue to drive this messaging. So again, pivot a little bit, try and stay on this parallel track of what we always do, but do what we can to triage the COVID-19 related issues.
Mayor.
Let's go, since you last talked.
Yeah,
Let's go, Councilmember
It's a
Stewart.
great
then back
idea.
to you.
He's quick. He's quick on the button. Great stuff on the tourism piece. Thank you for that. A couple of ideas, and I think we've talked about them for the last few years, as we talked about sports tourism. Is that still on the radar? I know it's kind of recession-proof. Parents continue to invest in their children no matter what is going on with the economy. I know I did in 2008. Have you guys given me more talk about that?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Stewart, it is something that's on our ED radar when we meet with these meeting planners. It is something that comes up. From a tourism perspective, we don't really have big chunks of field space to market. So that's one of the things we continue to try and work through with Parks and Rec. I know that's not the right title of that department, but it's always gonna be Parks and Rec in my mind. To get that field space set aside. And I know Andy's looking at regional tournaments as well, and he's more open to that approach. So it's definitely something we still look at, We pitch Chandler when it's available, but the other existing assets that have a little bit more flexibility in use, the tennis center is something that we continue to pitch for tennis tournaments. Races, marathons, events where we have the built-out infrastructure, we continue to push those, and we'll be having a half marathon and marathon coming up, hopefully. So it is on our radar. We're really just, we're stuck in this field crunch is really what it boils down to from a tourism perspective. As those fields become available, if council were to set aside a block, we'd be more than happy to partner with Parks and Rec to go out there and pitch that. Again, 12 to 24 months in advance, because that's how long it takes to get in the cycle.
Thank you.
Councilmember Orlando.
Thank you, Mayor. So are banks lending?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Orlando, yes. Banks are lending. There's the SBA 7A loans, PPP programs, EIDL loans. Those are going out. I think Arizona received about 43,000 of those loans lately in the second tranche. So it was a major uptick, and I think it was a little less than 4 million that came through that program, and that's 95% guarantee. Those loans have really been going to business of all size. The first tranche of PPP really seemed to go to the larger ones. The second tranche, they made a really focused effort to get those dollars out to the small businesses. The challenge that a lot of businesses are facing, it's a question of debt. Do I want to take on more debt independent of these federal incentive lending programs, not knowing what the future holds? And so there is lending available. Really comes down to the risk appetite on the on the base industries, the manufacturing. Those guys seem more willing to take on debt, and a lot of their lending partners are okay with it. The retail restaurant guys, there's a little bit more trepidation about getting into that business just without knowing what the COVID runway looks like.
So it's mixed with the banks, what you're saying. Obviously, if you want a large construction project, are we going to see something like that? Or, I mean, is that type of lending I'm looking at?
Through the mayor, are you asking specifically
Yeah,
about
like if
lenders
there's
to
a lar-
construction?
Yeah, there's a large office project. Are they being put on hold? I understand the PPP. I mean, that has been all over the.
That's a good question. If it's a build to suit type of project where the anchor tenant is known, or if it's a speculative project with a tenant in tow, the lenders are definitely more willing to make a loan. If it's purely speculative, there's a lot more hesitation, and the banks are requiring the developer to step up with more equity. Usually it was like a 50-40 type of equity split. Now they're coming in well above that just because of the unknown.
So you said your team has been looking into the hotels, motel business. What are they finding out? I mean, how long they're telling they think they'll be back at 100%, or is there a stair step that maybe 25%, 30% for, whatever that, are they saying anything to you as a group environment?
Through the mayor, Councilman Orlando. So we participate again with some of our stakeholders, AOT, Travel and Tourism Bureau. We're having this continual conversations, outreach to our specific properties in Chandler. There's not a ton of good guidance, in all honesty. Some of the larger full service hotels are closing, and that's because their overhead costs are much higher. You have restaurants and pools and gyms and all that stuff. They are really looking towards, some of them will say we're going to open in July with, with an asterisk of maybe it's really going to be August 1. The limited service business hotels, those are open. There seem to be a little bit more, the word is excitement that that occupancy will wrap up faster. Unfortunately for Greater Phoenix, outside of those resort properties that traditionally have like stay and play, vacations, pools, it's our slow season anyways. If this was hitting, November through March, we would be in a totally different scenario. So our occupancy is already down. It's obviously suffering more, but the guidance has really been across the board based on property types. The luxury is going to take, I think, a little bit longer time to come back. The limited stay business travel might be a little bit quicker, but it's not going to be for that business travel as we're used to. It's, people who can't go home. because they're providing healthcare and they don't want to potentially expose their family to that. So there's not a ton of good guidance. We're not, from the ED side on the tourism, through Prop 302 funding, we're taking a conservative approach and saying probably not till January, where we're going to see a significant uptick in occupancy. But that's purely speculation on our side.
Well, that's fine. I appreciate that. Thanks. Thanks, Mayor.
Councilmember Huang.
We know in April, many tenants tell their landlords in commercial property, many tenants tell their landlords that they are not going to pay for the April rent. And so what are those landlords do? And do they receive some kind of assistance? And the second question is, how much does that affect our sales tax?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Wong. So yeah, there has been a reduction on paying rent from the retail perspective. The different loan programs that have been rolled out federally do allow for those funds to go to pay for mortgage or rent relief. The projections on what it means to the city of Chandler is something that Dawn and I continue to communicate on, and she tracks it. On her side, we take a look at it from our side as well and what we're seeing in occupancy levels and doing some projections. Again, I think that'll be based on some of the numbers that Dawn will receive here in the next few weeks.
My question is, how those landlords take care of this situation that their tenants are not going to pay for them for 4 months?
Yeah, through the mayor, Councilor Wong. So early on, we started having outreach calls with our landlords and property owners to get their perspective. And the feedback we received was completely across the board. The office and industrial guys continuing to get rent to the tune of 80 to 90%, retail, like I said, in that 40% range. It really comes down to their specific leases is the feedback we received. The landlords obviously want to take care of their tenants. There's genuine sympathy for them, but some of them have different lending terms contractually with their banks on what they can and can't do. So it comes down to the specific loan the property owner has on their building and then what they can do for their property.
Are the landlords going to forgive those rents or?
Through the mayor, Councilor Wong, some of them, I don't think there's going to be forgiveness. It may be they'll tack it on at the end, they'll amortize it. Others, they can't do any of that based upon their financing structure with their lenders. So their banks that ultimately hold the note on the property have it spelled out. You can do this, this, or this in terms of rent forgiveness, abatement, and that flexibility. So again, it's really on a per property basis what the landlord can do.
I know the question may be too early to ask, but how much percentage do you expect those retailers are going to close?
Wow.
I understand the question may be too early to ask. But.
Yeah, through the mayor, Councilor Wong, it is too early. We're tracking it very closely through our databases, anecdotally with our landlords, property owners, property managers to get their perspective. I would hate to speculate. There will be challenges. I don't want to sugarcoat it. I don't think that would be genuine. There will be pain on some of these businesses.
Okay, thank you.
Keep going.
Right. Okay. One of the things we were on that from the very get-go, we were wanting to be proactive in communication, especially around the funding programs that were coming out. There's a lot of confusion. PPP was rolled out. People couldn't get their loans processed. They couldn't get idle. They were told they would get funding in 3 days. So we were really serving as a conduit for information with our partners. We weren't trying to be everything to everybody. That's not our role. And so our role is to provide clear direction, and that's what we were working on. And then on the public safety side, working very closely with fire, PD, and the county and state health officials to work up communication strategies around what you can do. How can you go about operating your business? I talked a little bit earlier about coordinating calls with our property owners, getting their input. It was great feedback. They were really excited. We were the only city to reach out to property owners to get their perspective, what they're experiencing. And again, being proactive, being engaged with these folks is really critical. And then we weren't trying to be everything to everybody. ACA has its role, GPEC has its role, our chamber was doing programming, ASU was doing stuff. We weren't looking to recreate the wheel. We were really coordinating with our partners to have everybody fill the niche they play in. Specific here to the city of Chandler, mayor and council, as you know, took action to release our sign codes. We were really out in front of that, one of the first cities to do that. And then council took the action to not disconnect on any of our utility services. And downtown is working on implementing 30-minute carryout so those restaurant and retailers can still have the pickup drop-off flexibility that they're currently experiencing because of the attendance in downtown. Electronic response, it feels like overkill. Sometimes we're sending out news blasts, citywide, ED, tourism, really just to keep people informed. People that when this all started, there was a lot of confusion. Again, we were trying to provide clear and concise feedback. Really what Chandler PD was putting out in terms of the Business Watch program was phenomenal. We received a lot of positive feedback from tenants and property owners asking for that additional service. The scammer awareness, once the PPP and EIDL program started coming through, as good as it was, there's always going to be some negative. And so we started putting out clear communication on scammer awareness. And I think on the mental health support, this was something we were all really concerned about from the onset, is people's livelihoods were at stake here. What could we do from a city perspective to make sure that there were resources available from the appropriate agencies to make sure people could talk to somebody, they could get the advice, the counseling to deal with the stress they were under. Economic performance tracking, really at a macro, micro level. I know the city manager's office has shared some of this with you, but this is something our office keeps a close eye on. We're waiting the data to come in. It's all happened really fast. And so we don't have a really wide data set to look at. We're looking at the high level GDP, macro, and real estate numbers. And so we're really taking a look at that. And then our business outreach calls. Early on, we reached out to locates, recent expansions, just to get a sense. At that time, there was panic and there was fear and people didn't know what was going on. As we've continued to make these calls over the past 2.5, 3 months, you can just hear in people's voices, the stress level has come down. People understand what's going on. They're able to respond. And that was some of the feedback we got from our early calls with our property owners is we're not making any rash decisions. We're gonna see how this plays out, see what the federal government does, see what market liquidities look like. And so we've seen, people go from completely hair on fire to being cool, calm, and collected, like, just corporate assassins really working on getting their business taken care of. And it's been really good. And because those first few months, everybody was stressed and staff was leaving here distraught, taking on a lot of the calls I know all mayor and council received, but that's really died down and people are working against their business plan to adjust in this COVID business climate. Some of the new initiatives we rolled out were the business resource webpage, citywide thing was a tremendous asset resource. We developed the Shop Chandler web map. It's actually got a ton of coverage, ABC 15. Profiled it just last week. And that's where businesses could upload what they're doing, specials, if they're hiring. And so that's really been something on the forefront of what we've been looking to do. We, from a tourism perspective, put the Visit Chandler conference call backgrounds up. Not a huge thing, but it was fun. I mean, it was something that the community got engaged in. We reached out to DCCP, the chamber, other businesses to provide us images that people could download from the Visit Chandler website to show their Chandler pride. The business resource update video, fortunately, that fell on me. I'm not really comfortable with that stuff, but they've been really well received. And it's something that we're probably going to continue to do. Really talking about, in this particular photo, this was with Cecilia Ash. She sits on the Economic Development Advisory Board. She's a banker talking about program services, how businesses can go about generating new relationships with lenders if they don't have one. And that's really one thing that we've started to really push back on our local businesses is if you don't have a local lender you have a personal relationship with and you are doing purely web-based banking, the situation hasn't been really good for you. So having those personal one-on-one relationships is valuable. Good news stories. There's a lot of good things going on in Chandler. Businesses are hiring. They're expanding. They're volunteering time. Keeps giving money away. Zovio is engaged. Rogers is doing fantastic things. So there's good stuff going on that we felt was important to highlight all the positive things taking place. And then our business surveys. I mean, not totally new, but you know, the feedback we got is we're ready to rock and roll as you know, COVID begins to die down. And even if there is a spike, a lot of businesses feel like they're well prepared to make shifts in how they conduct their activities. And then we've received a lot of questions about what are other cities doing? And so we went out and surveyed every community across the valley in cooperation with another community. Dorian Cott, the Economic Development Director for the town of Queen Creek, jumped on the phone and helped make some phone calls with me. And really, across the board, everybody's pretty much doing the same thing to support their community. Tempe is the minor outlier here. And then Phoenix, Mesa, and Tucson from a statewide level are all receiving federal capital in terms of the CARES Act. So Phoenix is getting, I think, $293 million, and they're putting $15 million towards small business assistance. Mesa's getting $90 million. I think they're putting $20 million towards small business assistance. We don't know if we're going to get anything from the state or through the county, and so we're continuing to track that. But everybody's kind of in the same boat right now from a municipal perspective. What's interesting is what Chandler is doing, we're generally 2 to 3 weeks out in front of the rest of the cities providing that leadership. And I know that's not just specific to economic development, but across other departments in the city.
Councilmember Orlando.
So you mentioned a couple of times you're reaching out to the business community. How many phone calls have you made? And do you have a number on that?
Yeah, through the mayor, Councilmember Orlando, we're about 300 right now. Business calls made. Early on, like I said, we made the outreach to our recent locates and announcements with hypothesis in mind in terms of the feedback we would receive. That hypothesis was proven out. It's the retail restaurant businesses that were really struggling. We've continued to make outreach calls to our base industries to see where they are at in hiring and expanding possible contraction. It's not a metric that was on our leading edge. Once we had that small sample size of 50 or so, it's played out throughout the course of the COVID response. So
you made 300. How big is your pool?
the pool citywide, there's probably, depending on the data set you look at, I think we have about 5,000 businesses in the city of Chandler of varying sizes, whether that's 1 employee to 11,000 at Intel.
How do you communicate to the business community? Or maybe Matt can help, but I'm curious, a lot of these programs I didn't hear about. How are we getting that word out to the business community?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Orlando, some of them in terms of the different programs we have. Website, social media is our most effective bang for the buck, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, personal phone calls to the businesses. Interestingly enough, in the onset, and we were making those calls, the feedback we were getting is, how can we get our hand on money? Then when the PPP and EIDL loans came through, that took a little bit of stress off folks. Later on, the conversation shifted from loans to now I just want a grant, and we're not in a grant type of situation. And so our messaging is citywide, and then obviously through the economic development channels, our e-newsletter, social media, outreach calls, word of mouth relationships.
So what's this 10P model you're talking about? What are they doing there specifically?
MP?
Yeah.
Through the mayor, Councilman Orlando, they did 2 different programs. The first one was a voucher system that they did in partnership with their IDA, their Downtown Merchants Association, their tourism folks, and their chamber. And that was the Hound voucher program. It was basically a prepaid gift card that the Chandler, or excuse me, the Tempe IDA put money into. And then they also did a $1 million, basically, they backed up to $1 million in collateral with a banking institution. Interestingly enough, that kind of gets into what the Chandler IDA does through our collateral assistance program, and that's kind of further in the slide. So those are the two big things that Tempe took a look at, was their small business lending through guaranteed collateral with the bank, and then their HAM program.
So the IDA, how are we getting that word out to businesses that there's a program we're established, or do we have a program established?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Orlando, good question. So we have the Chandler IDA through our regular business retention visits, market assessment meetings with local Chandler businesses. It's part of our conversation with them that the Chandler IDA exists primarily to serve as a conduit lender for specific types of projects that are spelled out in the IDA laws. Within that, the Chandler IDA has a program, and Don, if I can't get the specificity, will you jump up and pitch it for me? Don's the board liaison to the IDA board, but it's the Chandler Collateral Assistance Program. And what it does is it's very similar to what Tempe is doing with their $1 million backstop. It's a program that provides up to $50,000 in collateral or 20% of the total loan amount. So that's been in existence since 2013. And that's constantly marketed. It's been on the ED website. We've been sharing on social media and our COVID-19 response page, excuse me, with businesses.
And then the $1 million program that we have from the fees and services that we collect, that's a separate program?
Yep, through the mayor, Councilmember Orlando. The Chandler IDA, go back to that slide, they collect fees off of the bond issuance. So they're not issuing bonds, it's the fees received, say when Intel uses us for $500 million in conduit funding. The IDA board receives a fee based off that conduit lending that we then set aside into, or the IDA board sets aside. And they can do a lot of different things with it. They aren't held to the same legal requirements that the city of Chandler is. And so they've done grants in the past to different entities around the community.
So are they meeting now, the IDA board?
IDA board is meeting, I believe they meet every month, on second Tuesday of the month.
Okay, so again, I just want to make sure we're in sync here. So we have this almost $1 million worth of IDA fees. We have a program in place that's being advertised so that business could do what? Is there a certain amount of loan they get, or is it a grant? What are they giving? What are we giving them?
So on the collateral assistance side, that's a formal program. I think
That's not, I understand that.
So you're talking more specific to the fees.
How do we help the people today?
So that's a question that I think staff is really looking to get some direction from council on, in terms of what type of bumpers would you like to provide staff to play within, and maybe approaching the IDA board and setting up formal grant programs, lending programs outside of the collateral assistance program. So that's kind of one of the things we want to take away from here is, as a policy board, what types of things would you like Don and I to approach the IDA board on, potentially use those fees? And then we have some other ideas on the city side around development services to help businesses that currently have permits in, looking for an expansion. Thank you so much.
So, Mayor, I'm sorry. So, and I appreciate that. So I guess my question to you is this: with the overarching need being done today, that's the goal. We have a pot of money that could help some businesses, whether this helps them through long-term or short-term. So I guess my question to you would be, what are your thoughts? What are other communities doing? How are we, and come back to us with some ideas. I mean, we could set up, I just don't know. I don't know what legally you can do, you can't do. I mean, I just found out they meet once a month. And, again, I may have some ideas. I could throw stuff at you, but what good is that if I don't have thoughts on what other cities are doing or how they're approaching this?
Yeah. Through the mayor, Councilmember Orlando, each city has a different approach to their goals. I think from the city of Chandler perspective, ED definitely, we work off the strategic plan as council approved, really focusing on those base industries to drive economic development. However, if council wanted to have us explore assisting retail businesses, restaurants, that's something we could definitely take a look at and build some maybe ideas around and take that to the IDA board for consideration. Obviously, we'd have to pitch it to the board for adoption through formal programming. And I think that's some of the conversation
All
we're
right,
trying to
that's a
understand.
good framework. Thanks, Mayor.
Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. So just to rewind, the Mesa and Phoenix received federal funding that they're distributing to private business through a grant or a loan program.
Through the mayor, council member, Phoenix, Tucson, and Mesa are the three municipalities in the state that receive CARES Act funding. They are all setting aside the funds in kind of different pots and how they want to spend it. A lot of it is around rent forgiveness, or not, let me say forgiveness. They will be paying somebody's rents or utilities or helping with the acquisition of personal protection equipment. Those are kind of the big framework areas that the act kind of said, this is what we want you to help. So that's how those funds will be distributed.
So they're getting federal dollars for private industry because they're larger than 500,000, but Chandler just says, we'll just, I don't understand. How is that fair market principle?
Let me address this.
Thank you.
A little bit what we're doing. So the overall arching the front of this is that states were given money and cities over 500,000 were direct recipients. Counties over 500,000 were direct recipients, sans the cities within them like Phoenix and Mesa for Maricopa. And then for smaller counties under 500,000 or cities under 500,000, their venue was to approach the state for this. There's been a lot of conversation and lobbying through the League of Towns and Cities to see what monies can be available. I've been working with Maricopa County on our half to have conversations with them to see what are some things available, because our direct conduit would be Maricopa County, not necessarily the state, because they're the 500,000 plus recipient that also relates to cities within them. So we're having conversations. They're addressing concerns around health in the county. They're addressing concerns, health, particularly around, in general, whether it's nursing homes or working with prisons or working with homelessness. Those seem to be their four priorities. And we and hopefully some others are also addressing them and saying, you are our direct line of conduit. How about some of the things that were for our pass-throughs? Other smaller cities like Casa Grande, who is in Pima County, their recourse is to talk directly to the governor. Neither the state, let me put it this way, the state and counties also have their own priorities that may or may not involve cities. So within them, they would benefit us, of course, if they're doing, for example, they're also talking in Maricopa County about contact tracing or testing. That would have an impact upon us, but not being under our jurisdiction of direction. There's also a move amongst cities under 500,000, having conversations with Senate and Congress about another wave of CARES funding that would go directly to smaller cities and states, smaller cities. In none of these cases, Phoenix cannot directly say that we're using this money because our revenues have fallen short. Neither can Mesa or Tucson. So it has to be a program that they administrate that serves their community from an impacted COVID-19 ways. For example, whether it's buying PPP or what Mesa or others are doing in order to do grants for those. But they can't say, look, we're really being hammered by $5 or $50 million. We can let us apply that money for that. That's not happening to anybody. So it's kind of a convoluted program, particularly if you're a small dog in any state. And so we're still lobbying, we're conversing, and we're seeing what options are available to us.
That's an eye-opening explanation, Mayor, and thank you for that. That was, clearly you've been in tune with that. I think the bigger picture then here is that our city is going to be at a competitive disadvantage because there's $90 million flowing to Mesa to help support and prop up their business community somehow, some way, whether that's through healthcare or whatever it may be. That just simply is not, that's not how this is supposed to work. And I'm not pointing that at you or you, Mayor. I'm just pointing that at maybe maybe Jack Sellers, our county supervisor, is watching, but that just isn't fair. That isn't fair to our restaurateurs. That it's going to mean a cheaper hamburger across the border than it will here when this is all said and done. So that trickle down is going to mean that Chandler's going to be paying more, and that's unacceptable.
So with Maricopa County just last week voted to receive the dollars from there, and they do have a tentative draft, although it is considered tentative. And again, I think we inserted ourselves in a very timely fashion, and we continue to lobby and press with them as well as we can in this position.
Thank you, Mayor, for doing that.
No, Mayor, thank you for doing that as well. And Councilmember Stu, I agree 100% on you. It was a great article in this weekend's paper exactly delineating that. And I'm saying to myself, where's our share here? It's no different than a CDBG funding or transportation or something for a road or a street. We normally get our quote share of that to be able to take care of our community first. You're right on target on that, 100%.
And we'll also see on Thursday then that obviously we have CDGB dollars that we were presented with in terms of asking advice, and there will be a recommendation that we will be looking at on Thursday. But again, that's a smaller pot, and our city is also painstakingly documenting whatever expenses that are related to COVID-19. And you know, through U.S. Conference of Mayors, I had close to 5,000 masks that are being donated. And the first question out of the city manager's mouth is there expense we can document with that? So we're, maybe not the first question. Yeah, but I mean, we are endeavoring to at any level we can to see, are there ways that we can document, whether through DOMA, FEMA, or possibly through CARES, to get money to Chandler. So, Councilmember McClymans.
Yeah, in addition to that, Councilmember Stewart, in communication receiving through Jack Sellers, I reached out to Marcia to learn more about what we could relate to COVID expenses. And the day before, the mayor already reached out to Marcia to try to track down those dollars. I know that they're aware of it. We'll see what happens, but I feel for your concern. Yeah.
I mean, if it's monopoly money, we should all get a little bit of it, right?
I have no comment on monopoly. All right, please continue, Mike.
So in summary, Chandler across the board is being seen as a response leader, whether it's public safety, municipal services, economic development. People are calling us wanting to know what we're doing, because we are very much, like I said, 2.5, 3 weeks in advance of a lot of cities. So we're definitely seen in that light, which I think is a major testament to mayor and council and what you've asked staff to do. So it's good to see we've been proactive. We want to be out there communicating, letting people know what's going on, planning for the future. Whether it was by happenstance, we're thinking about 2.0 of Chandler Fashion Center, and then this happens, or other items. We're very much thinking about what's coming around the corner and how we can position ourselves. Balancing activities, we've been calling it the 2-bucket approach in economic development. We've got council directed, this is what you're going to do in economic development, this is what we want to see, and oh, by the way, hey, we've got this COVID issue, we need to respond to our businesses and get them the resources they need. The reopening of the facilities is another one of those things that Chandler is very much out there on, and our residents are asking for it, and staff is here to execute council vision. And my takeaway here is I got a couple questions to get some more continuous feedback on subleasing from Councilmember Orlando, and then Don and I can maybe build some ideas that we could take forward to the IDA in terms of how that they would like to maybe put programmatic things in place for the expense of those funds. On the IDA funds, from an ED perspective, we're always thinking about those funds and how we could deploy them on different projects. But we use it judiciously. It's $916,000, over $1 million now in place. And so it's a pool of money. It's not huge, but we're just trying to be mindful about how we can go about deploying those resources to have the best ongoing economic impact.
Come back with ideas, yeah.
All right, so I guess back to that, what specific, IDA, obviously, they're the ones that are going to be following direction with us. And your current policy of supporting some of their base industries, you raised a question about, are there ways that you would like recommendations from council to add program to that or programming to that, or please repeat that part.
Mayor, I guess the question is when Don and I approached the IDA board on potential programs that they could implement, set up for the use of those collected fees, are there some framework you would like staff to approach them, maybe build some of the program around, just so we can have an understanding of, staff wants to be mindful of the direction you want us to head. So are there lanes you want us to stick in? Are there certain things you would like to see these dollars go for? Just helping us understand so we can build a program to take to IDA.
Vice Mayor.
So, thank you, Mayor. So Mike, I'm kind of a simple man, not very educated, so I need to make sure that I understand.
You went to the U of A. I know you're very educated.
I didn't want to rub it in anybody here from ASU, so I just didn't want to, I'm a humble man. So my understanding, so it kind of gets, we have about $1 million in this bucket now. I'm going to throw some questions at you, may be able to answer, and Don may have to jump in too. How often does this get replenished? So how much annually, monthly, is this something that grows continuously, or is it only when, again, that's my understanding, it's done off of the bonds. So, I mean, what does it look like? Is it constantly growing, or is it jumping up and down?
Through the mayor, Vice Mayor Lopez, it grows very, very slowly. It depends on the bond issues that come forward to the board. As of recent, the Intel bond issues have been the main issues that have allowed us to increase that amount more over the last few years than it has over, even 5 years before that. So we've built that, or the IDA has built that balance up through those annual fees coming in. As long as the bonds are outstanding, those bonds are paying annual fees into the IDA, and those collect. And they are a separate nonprofit. So the board, their main activity is issuing bonds to support economic development. But those fees, there's a little bit of leeway around how they can use them. They still have to support economic activity. They have to meet the mission of the IDA, and the mission, of course, set by the Articles of Incorporation that were set up by the City Council back in 1979. But they have some leeway with those dollars. And currently, the collateral assistance program is one thing, but over the last few years, there has been numerous loans and grants provided based on applications that have been received by the board. They can deliberate. We always pull in our bond counsel to help provide guidance on that, to make sure that we're making sure that there's consideration, that they're measurable. There's information coming back in how those dollars are supporting economic development, that there's job creation, that type of thing. So that is part of what the IDA has been talking about during this COVID period. It has been an ongoing conversation. There's two boards, IDAs, larger IDAs, Phoenix and Maricopa County are two of the larger IDAs that they actually bring in so many fees on an annual basis that they have staff that can help with loan programs. And the Phoenix IDA set aside, I believe it was $2.6 million, and they're doing $10,000 grants to small businesses with very specific guidance but they have staff that reviews those applications and so on, and same with Maricopa County. And I don't know how much they've actually set aside, the Maricopa County one. But some of the smaller IDAs like Chandler, many of the communities around us, they have similar type collateral assistance type programs, and they do look at grants requests or loan requests that come forth to the independent boards when those do come forward.
So again, a couple things there. So I'm hearing we built up to this million, but it took many, many, many years, mostly because of the Intel bond that came through. That's been a couple of years now already.
Yeah.
Nice. What I'm hearing is that we deplete that, we're probably not going to see that value, that return to $1 million again for a long time again. So this is something that is built over time, but again, it's not being replenished regularly. First note. Second one is, again, right now it sounds like the intention is for us to use this was for the larger economic development program. So we kind of had an idea again already before COVID, pre-COVID, that we were going to do some of our assistance or larger economic development program projects that would come through to use those as part of the incentive programs and such that we've done in the past. Is that kind of what I'm hearing, my understanding? And you said that not only that, but we currently already do grants and programs out of that fund currently.
Through the Mayor, Vice Mayor Lopez, that is correct. That is an active program. The last request that we received was actually, I have that here, 2018 was our last one, and before that it was 2015. So they're not super frequent, but when they do come forward, they're typically something that gets deliberated, an agreement gets drawn up, and measurable, how to report back to the board is built into the agreement. But that is something that's been part of what they do for years, part of the IDA's activities.
Mayor, let me ask a question first. So with this, it's obvious that we have small, medium-sized companies that are just struggling. They may or may not have received PPP or EIDL loans like this, but in order to take advantage of this, this would have to not just replenish salaries lost because of their revenue generation, but it would have to be used to substantiate economic growth in the city of Chandler. I think you started off with that. Is that correct? And so it couldn't just be, well, we're being slammed and we're looking for some place to turn. I mean, one of the prerequisites of this would not just be staying alive, but would be expansion type programs of a small restaurant or a business that had a direct bearing on our overall economic development. Is that a correct statement, or am I misreading you?
Mayor, you are correct. If it is a loan or a grant, it's typically something that's looking to the future economic development expansion and contributing to that. When it comes to the collateral assistance, though, there is a provision within there that it can be used for working capital. So if a company is looking to kind of give them the boost they need to get out of this, they can actually apply through a banking institution, and the Chandler IDA can partner with that bank and provide that guarantee on that loan, like Micah was saying, up to $50,000 or 20% of the loan value. So it kind of gives them that extra boost to get that loan and get going again. That's the collateral assistance program. But we typically just don't receive random requests from businesses. Those are typically directed to a bank.
So is the collateral assistance program also coming out of this pool of money? Okay, so that's also bearing weight out of that. Okay. Councilmember Stewart.
I have a number of questions, and so trying to get my head wrapped around this as it relates to the collateral assistance program. That's a loan, and then are we like talking about grants with this $1 million? And that money was built from, most of it came from Intel, I would imagine, right? And so would that normally be used for like churn or, to lack of a better term, would we use that money to incentivize other opportunities for business? So for example, you've got Project Cheese, cheddar coming in. You're going to use that for hiring incentives and things like that. Is that drawn from that bucket of money?
Now, through the mayor, Councilmember Stewart, because the IDA is a separate political subdivision of the state of Arizona, it's connected to the city, but it is a completely separate entity from the city. Those funds, that bond transaction, everything that happens through the IDA is separate. Those funds are not ours. That activity, that bond activity is not ours. It's a conduit between private entities and a bank that allows them access to tax exempt financing. So the laws are really strict because whenever you're dealing with tax exemptions, federal and state laws and a lot of scrutiny goes around that. But those fees that come in with any IDA, those can accumulate over time, and it is silent in state and federal laws in how they can manage those fees. So a bond counsel typically states, because it's related to those bond transactions, that they need to still follow the mission of the IDA as established by our mayor and council. It needs to have that economic development element to a loan or a grant. They can't just loan or grant to anybody with those fees. But because they are limited and they come in very slowly, it is something that they take very seriously. When there is an application made to the board, it is deliberated. It's really looked at as what exactly will be the impact on the community? Is this worthwhile to put those dollars towards? If we were trying to do something in the midst of COVID, and this is where the conversation with the IDA board has gone, we're too small to actually take on a loan program unless we partnered with a bank and did something where the bank we don't actually issue loans. We can't. So we would have to work through a bank to do some sort of a small business loan program. We don't have the staff. We're not experts on that. In the past, the requests that have been made, depending on what they are, we can do a very simple agreement using our bond counsel as our attorney. The IDA can, but those are, again, just another way in which they can use those additional fees that have accumulated over time. Does that help?
Councilmember Orlando.
So, Mayor, like I said earlier, there's a lot of pieces to this puzzle. My only concern is that you have staff go back, and we talked about this a few months ago. Remember, we did have this conversation here, and the direction at that time, at least, was to go back and figure out how we could use this $900 or $1 million today. So it's been a few months now since we've actually talked about this. So I guess my question to staff is, you're the experts. I am concerned about small business surviving. The other day, someone says, I don't know where I'm going to get the shields to put up in between my booths. So maybe that's something they could get a grant for $400, $500. Little things like that could help them be successful. So my suggestion, Mayor, is you go back under in my mind, the general guidance of helping a small business or entities that support small businesses, because they could leverage their dollars as well, that are looking for some kind of support to get them through this next 4 to potentially, as you said, January, 8-9 months. So that's my thoughts.
Here, I mean.
Vice Mayor.
So, but I think the question they're asking though is right now, correct me if I'm wrong though, because it's IDA and the way the defined rules behind it are, we can't use any of this money for COVID as it is right now. We as a council have to redefine the edict on how the money can be used. Because it was here you said it had to all be used for economic development. Is that correct?
Through the mayor, Vice Mayor Lopez, because the IDA is a separate nonprofit from the city, the council can make recommendations to the IDA board on use of those dollars, can provide guidance to say, look for opportunities for small businesses. And they're already having those conversations. And tomorrow we actually have it as an agenda item to talk about that as well. But right now we've actively only received in the last week 1 grant request from the chamber.
Well, and that could be due to not understanding against small
Right.
business, not knowing it's usable for whatever, beyond that or and I don't know what kind of, like you said, the businesses may know about the IDA and what is available for it, but But so I'm hearing though that, again, so then I'm a little confused because if the IDA board can already issue grants and loans and or loan backings, not loans, but the collateral,
Guarantees.
for COVID reasons, why do they need our edict if it's only a recommendation?
I think that's kind of what we're hoping to get from council is certain direction on, do you guys, from an ED perspective, is it for restaurant, retail? Is it for rent? Is it for utilities, items like that? Because it is a small pot of money. And so from the ED perspective, we're trying to narrow down on, okay, if Don and I are going to sit down and try to put together a program, what high-level objectives would council really like staff to take forward in a proposal to the IDA in some sort of coordinated application program?
And my assumption would be that you would want also some, like you said, some guide rails behind segmenting of grants, segmenting of the collateral, because again, the more grants we give out, the less collateral we're eventually going to wind up with. And again, any future Asiago projects that may come through, we're not going to have this bucket of money to assist with that, right? So it, like you said, it's that balancing act of the grant, the collateral, and again, retaining a balance to ensure that we have the money available for future projects. All right.
So let me make a thought, Council, is could you determine to us, and I'm not asking for an answer tonight, but is there an amount of that money that you feel confident that if we wanted to assist small businesses with, for the items that you just mentioned, a recommendation of that amount, whether it's half, a third, whatever, I would like to know that. And then I don't want an answer right now, but from your recommendation of working with that fund, and then also with the guy, we don't want to be in the business of picking and losing companies that are going to make it by getting this amount of money or not, if we're actually going to be financing. And maybe Phoenix doesn't either by just giving $10,000 and then, then it's out on that side. But I would certainly like to take whatever, if council is amenable to taking a percentage of that money, I would want it to be spread out in a way that could impact a number of companies rather than just, less than a half dozen or something. So if you could give us guidelines on those type of recommendations, and I see two other comments here, would be helpful for me to know how to help. Councilmember McClymans and then Stewart.
To piggyback on your thought process, I like that. So, federal money, the PPP, we burn through billions of dollars just like that. So this is $1 million. So even if we carve out, it's going to go quickly and fast. And then you're in a position of picking winners and losers. One of the things that I think we've all said, but as mayor and council cohesively, when we wrote the letter to the governor to encourage us to ramp back up in a responsible manner where we're watching out for the safety of the community while getting back to business as soon as we can. If the focus is on small grants or small numbers to many to maybe help them businesses deliver safety and maybe even encourage businesses if they can get those dollars to deliver safety when maybe they wouldn't have, we can reach a lot more people because we're going to burn through that money quickly, however you look at it.
Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the very, very thorough explanation. I think I go back to the bigger picture here of well, two things. One, are we allowing an unelected body to distribute general fund dollars to businesses based on application or no? That's
not general fund. We know that. Right?
Well, they come from fees, right? They're taxes that are paid by the business owner. So you can call them whatever you want. No? But
No.
if we were using to incentivize economic development, how would that work?
Mayor,
If you were
could
to
I
use it
clarify
for, go ahead, yeah.
So, like I said, this is a completely separate legal entity. It is considered a nonprofit, a completely separate political subdivision. The IDA is governed by a very specific set of rules, and it is literally the ability to be a conduit between private entity getting a tax exempt status on their bond deal. But they pay a very pretty substantial fee in order to have that opportunity. But it is separate from the city. Those dollars are not ours. They're not even under our I guess we can't pull them into general fund. We can't say how those dollars are used. When those fees come through and they get accumulated, they're invested completely separate in their legal entity, separate from the city's funds. So that's when we're talking about supplementing city programs, that's up to the IDA board because they are a separate legal entity. I guess we have the articles of incorporation and how they're to operate. Mayor and council appoint the board members, but they do operate independently.
So the fee, in other words, a tax, is charged by so that's what I'm trying to get at. The fee is a tax, right? Go ahead.
Through the mayor, Councilmember Stewart, I think I understand where you're coming from.
Thank you.
The fee is not a tax because the entity, let's say it's company XYZ, they can go out and use any IDA they want. They're electing to engage in this. They don't have to come to the Chandler IDA and utilize us as the conduit. So they're basically purchasing a service, and the cost of that service is the fees.
Yeah.
It's not a tax on them. So they could go to another IDA, and that other IDA can offer different service fees.
So council, I'm going to give you a choice. We can either say, I could certainly agree with Councilmember McClymonds on that type of recommendation, but ask them to come back to us with further information. But either way, we can come back with this part of the conversation or call this good. And then after our study session, we still have a second part of this work session to resume. But is this all right?
Yes, I agree. I think just having them go down, throw a couple different scenario recommendations together, and we can
right.
evaluate that and see where our pain threshold is.
I need a chart.
All right.
I gotta know.
So
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you, Micah. Thank you, Don. So council, let's take about 5 minutes, and then we will start our study session this evening and then resume our work session afterwards.
me to higher ground. We'll be safe and sound. Reach for me. Should have known right away when it felt too good to be true. 'Cause you never said what you mean to say. So anyway, you look at it, I'm confused. If you can see where this is gonna lead, reach for me. Don't wanna wait another day without you. Take me to higher ground. Come on, reach for me. I can't wait another day without you. Take me to higher ground. We'll be safe and sound. Reach for me. Reach for me. Got it all figured out.
Welcome, everyone, to our study session of Monday, May 11th, 2020. We have all of our council here, and so I'd like to call this study session to order. Council, tonight we've got roughly 20 agenda items. On Thursday, we have 2 public hearings and 2 action items that are also, we'll be looking at on Thursday, but tonight we just have the agenda, consent agenda items. There's been 1 item called in for question, that is Councilmember Orlando on item number 11. Councilmember Orlando.
Thank you, Mayor. Give her a minute to get up here. By the way, Lee, your staff did an excellent job in getting this turned around quickly, get it out to the community. That type of process was great. Thank you for expediting everything, because it is a need today. The question I have for you, though, is I know food is a big issue. You can't pick up a paper or read the news where there's lines of food, and I only saw $50,000 here going towards foods. Everything went towards, other entities. So what happened?
Mayor Harkey, Councilmember Orlando, we based the decisions on the applications that were received and having contact with the nonprofits that were applying for funding. In particular, the discussion of food did come up. In fact, it was part of a webinar that staff held prior to the applications being, the deadline for the applications coming in. We wanted to make sure all of our nonprofits understood what the funds were for and how to utilize them. What the feedback we've been receiving is that right now the food banks are doing well. A large regional food bank, United Food Bank, that serves many of our local food banks, has received federal money and is continuing to pass food down onto the smaller food banks. I also just learned of today, and unfortunately I'm not able to disclose who, but another one of our local food banks just got became part of a program that you'll be hearing about in the next few days that is going to have fresh food from including dairy and vegetables and things like that. So right now what we are hearing is that they are doing fairly well with food. The other thing I'd like you to keep in mind is that we still have our general fund allocations that are in process. And we will be sharing with the general fund panels everything that's occurring with all of the funding, whether it's CDBG, CDBG-CV, and the conversations we're having with the nonprofits, conversations we're having with council. There are other funds through general fund that might be better suited for food boxes in particular. Part of the reason is because of the strict guidelines with the CDBG-CV on the reporting. It's very challenging to maintain those files on the clients, the individual clients that receive assistance. It's a little bit easier when you talk about things like rent and utility assistance because they have to do income qualifying for those clients anyway. But when it comes to the food box, they're not keeping that same type of paperwork. So that's another reason that there are other funds that would be better suited towards assistance with food boxes. The other program that is being funded that's related to food, or being recommended to be funded that's related to food, is the senior meal program. That too has a different level of documentation with it. So the CDBG funds can be used there a little bit easier because it does have that other level of documentation for each of the clients.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, I was also a bit surprised again and hoping that we would have more qualified organizations apply for these auxiliary CDGB funds. But again, I understand with the additional paperwork that and everything that you just said, it's probably not the best fit. So we'll look forward to seeing where the other opportunities are, you know, through other funding with the city. So, Council, any other questions for Leah? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Council, any other questions on any other items on our consent agenda for Thursday? All right, seeing none. While this might be one of the fastest study sessions on record, we will resume our work session and talking about city planning. So this concludes, making a double check before Dana looks at me funny. All right, this concludes our study session.
Mayor, before you pound that.
Yes.
Kappa needs about 5 minutes to switch back.
All right, Council, we've got about a 5-minute break again before, since we're televising this, to resume our study session again. Point, City Manager.
All right, Mayor, Council, was there any other discussion for the economic development item?
I asked that question and everyone seemed to indicate they were fine, but is there any other questions for Micah? All right.
All right. All right, so the next item, as the mayor mentioned earlier, was to take a look again at where we were with the return to service plan and what other items had been, I believe Councilmember Stewart, you had asked for a look to see what we could possibly open that was not yet open. So with that, let me switch over so I can see what you're looking at here. There we go. Yeah, if I could see the presentation piece. See it here. There we go. All right. All right, so in phase one, and these are the things that had been implemented already per our discussions on April 23rd in the work session. We have implemented safety measures where needed in the first services that were opened under our phase 1 of our return to work plan. Secondly, the library circulation service for holds, pickup and drop-off items was opened a week ago. I believe it was a little slower start as expected, but by the end of the week, and Andy's here, I think things started to pick up in all 4 branches of the library in terms of holds and drop-offs and circulation. Code enforcement began again on health and safety cases that had been on hold during the time of COVID. Summer recreation program signups for Chandler residents has been started, and strategy and goals and procedures for opening facility in future phases is underway in all departments. The actions that were taken by council back in April were to open up the outdoor park amenities that were not covered under the governor's executive orders, including tennis center courts for drop-in play. And as we remember our last discussion, that was just the gate on the side. That was part of our phase 1 approach. Tennis and pickleball courts in the rest of the city. Dog parks are open, archery ranges open, disc golf opened, and skate and bike parks opened a little bit later, but they are open. And then board and commission meetings, council gave the direction that they could meet with limited attendance as long as we had social distancing.
City Manager, one question.
Yes, sir.
Is, we received or at least I received one email from an individual asking about other tennis courts, for example, Chandler High School or others. Do you know if we had any conversation with our school friends about opening any of their recreational facilities, or is there been any indication of the same?
Mayor, that is a really good question. Andy Bass is here. I'll get him to come up and give any information in regards to any discussions with the school district. But as you are definitely aware, we have no jurisdiction necessarily over the school district. So, Andy?
Yeah, currently, Mayor, the school district properties are all locked down based off of the school district has closed all their facilities. So it would be up to the school district to open up those recreational amenities, tennis courts, et cetera, at their schools. But I know that most of their parking lots are locked off and they're unavailable to the public.
Do you think, can we, is it worth at least a call just to see if they would be open, or if there are any plan to open some of these that are normally open on off-school hours? Tennis courts is a good example that would normally have been left open, but have been closed because of this, just to see, gauge their interest in adding these amenities to our community?
Yeah, I'm happy to reach out tomorrow.
Thank you. Please continue.
All right. Thank you, Andy. All right. So the next piece is the phase 2. So as council will recall from our very long discussion on the return to service plan here last month, we did have 3 phases built around what at the time was the president's opening of America. So on phase 2, I'm going to boil down all of those things we talked about that evening into one slide, basically. If I can get it to go. There we go. And see if there is any council direction in regards to either moving forward with phase 2 as a whole, except, of course, those items still covered under a governor's executive order, or any of these individual items that you want to go ahead and move forward with. So broke these up this time between facilities and services. So I'd like to talk about facilities first. And as you can see there on the slide, any and all of these would have to have the safety measures and social distancing, cleaning and proper PPE in place for both the protection of our staff and the public, where those two intermingle. So for facilities, the Environmental Education Center, the Community Center, and Snedeker Recreation Center was scheduled under phase 2 to open with limited hours. Would welcome any thoughts around that. Tennis center, clubhouse, and ball return rental would open, and I believe that would address at least one of the emails that you had received in regards to the use of the courts at the tennis center. The athletic field use for youth league practices only. A number of our leagues, I believe, have canceled their summer seasons, but we are getting requests from at least one league to begin practice and/or games, and Andy can certainly brief you better on exactly where we are with that and it would depend on council direction. Park ramadas and amenities that aren't covered under the executive orders, looking for direction on that. Libraries with limited services and reduced hours. In other words, we would go ahead and open the libraries is what we had proposed. It would just be those computers, and other areas would be very limited, and again, for a bit of reduced hours. And then along with the museum and vision gallery facilities, and you may remember we were not talking about any additional programs. We would just offer those, open those facilities with a limited number of people being able to come in and out. So I'll stop there and then see if you all have any comments about the facility side, and then we'll move into services.
So one question I would have is, while some of these facilities might be able to be opened until the governor further rescinds his order, there is still a maximum number with social distancing, or what's our thought along that process?
That's a good question, Mayor. Right now, it is up to, as long as it stays under the 50 number, we can move forward with that under the current guidelines by CDC. So in some of these areas, they would be either limited to 10, depending on the number of space we have available, because like the Vision Gallery is a much different facility than the library in downtown. So we would have to govern that by how many people amongst the square footage of space we have roaming around.
Okay. Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you pull that slide back up, please? So on most of these, is it possible to set up, a couple things. Is it possible to set up appointments for some of these things? Two, I know we had a meeting once and you said we were not going to be able to provide PPE for our staff. Is that changed?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Stewart, you're correct. We did have some discussion around PP&E. We will have that available. Yes, we did receive some more supplies to answer your question. So we can provide that for our frontline folks, definitely intermingling in there. But for say we have an accountant that doesn't intermingle with the public, we would not be looking to provide PP&E for that. So necessarily, unless they have that interaction. As far as appointments, Council, we are ready to open any and all of these today with council direction under phase 2. It would be very difficult in terms of an appointment process
Okay.
for that.
All right, great. Well, clearly we need to, I think it makes sense to open our athletic fields, the ramadas, because of the heat. We can discuss, can we do that process of deduction again and then kind of come back to what we may have some issues with? And so can we all agree that letting some kids do some small group things, or maybe we can't, but getting out on the outside and playing in our fields and our parks should be something I think we can get past. Yep.
Vice Mayor.
But all the green spaces are open, so technically they can go out and use practice fields now. Would that be correct? There's no booking, right? There's no youth sports booking of fields for games and formal reservations right now. Is that correct?
Correct, through the mayor to Vice Mayor Lopez. Right now, the fields are open for drop-in, unorganized play. But if it was a team looking to secure that place, we are not currently reserving our athletic fields.
So is that what you're asking, Councilmember, to
Well,
allow bookings?
Yeah, I think we were all paying attention to email today. There's some requests from the public to permit those fields for practice, or for, I think a couple of them said small groups.
Yeah, the only, through the mayor to Councilmember Stewart, the only request we've had is, most of the youth sports have canceled their spring season, but we have received a request from the soccer groups to be able to hold practice and training sessions. They're not looking at doing games at this point, but it would be simply following the U.S. soccer guidelines on how to do soccer practices during this time period.
Another question, Mayor.
Vice Mayor.
And right now, because, so under the governor's order, though, we're still under phase 1, correct?
Not even.
Through the mayor,
Or half, 3/4 phase 1, whatever he did, modified phase 1.
through the mayor and vice mayor, it is a little bit different in the governor's executive orders per our different phases that we have proposed. So the only thing that is currently still covered that I am aware of are gyms and pools, and then park amenities. And there was a list of about 4. I have them, sorry, let me get them. that are still covered under that. Let me get it here. Public parks, basketball courts, splash pads, playgrounds, and public restrooms, but parks shall remain open, as well as communal pools. And then gyms were definitely covered under in a separate executive order.
So of this list, you're saying that we would be able to open everything.
Correct.
And is there any limit in number of people, the 10, 50, or anything? Did he have that in his order?
No, those, Vice Mayor, are CDC guidelines around those numbers of people interacting.
And is there a current recommendation for the state of Arizona, whether it be 10 or 50, or is there not one we can, whatever?
Yeah, Mayor, Vice Mayor, it's the CDC guidelines. Those are federal guidelines that they keep pointing to for that.
And last question, the the tennis center, there you go. Does not fall within the realm of being a gym?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, that is correct. It is an outdoor facility and does not
But
fall
the
within
indoor, the clubhouse?
the spin cycle area and that sort of thing would have
Would
to
be-
remain closed, but we could open the doors to have the pro shop open
pro
so they
shop
could
there.
reserve
Okay.
courts and make sure who's playing on
Okay.
which courts.
Okay.
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I've looked at the list. It'd be great if we could get these various facilities and activities open again. I do have a question about cleaning, and you're talking about disinfecting, that sort of thing. Do we have a separate contract, or are our personnel doing that, or how's that being handled?
Mayor, Councilmember Rowe, actually a little bit of both, but our staff has pretty much taken over the disinfecting of these areas, but we also can do it through our custodial contract.
Okay. And then the only other thing is that ramadas are an example, but if somebody, as the heat ramps up, if they decide to get a ramada, we would probably just give them some paperwork reminding them of CDC rules. And then that's up to them to self-police.
As Mayor, Councilmember Rowe, it would be, however, I would expect that if we have large gatherings under ramadas, that we have permitted them to be there, you could receive some calls. So we're just gonna have to take a look at that. And some of our larger ramadas may have to go without reservations, but they are open and people are going there today.
Perfect.
Yes.
Love it.
Councilmember Orlando, then Councilmember Stewart.
For the chief, fire chief. Fire chief, I read some interesting news today. I wonder if you understood it and could give me some guidance on that. 3 weeks ago, the hospital said they had about 800 patients in the hospital that had COVID ID identified. Last week, they said they had 900 patients in the hospital with COVID ID identified in the hospital, not ICU, in the hospital. And then this week or last week, they had 1,000. What's driving that? What are your
Mayor,
thoughts on that?
Councilmember, I'm not sure what's driving it. I know that certainly they're doing more testing, which would obviously produce more positive patients, but to actually be admitted into the hospital, those would be symptomatic patients. And I haven't seen anything, across the board as far as what their numbers are. I know that AZDHS and Maricopa Public Health does update those. It was pretty consistent, but as far as if there is an uptick, I couldn't tell you what's driving that. We are, as I said, we're seeing more positives, although the last couple of days it's actually come down a little bit, but we're also testing. I mean, we're up to sometimes 6,000 tests in a single day where we were 500 to 1,500 before.
So we're testing positive. Some folks are being told to go home, self-isolate, but yet we're seeing the numbers going up as hospitalization. So therefore, there are those that actually need the hospitalization.
That's correct. So if they are, and I have not seen these numbers, but if they are being hospitalized, it would mean that they are symptomatic and it's severe enough that they cannot go home, that they're actually going to bring them inpatient. So that when you look at the hospital census, a lot of times they'll look at how many patients at that time are in the ICU or in some type of bed within the facility. And some of those patients are actually on the way out. They're on the way out to being discharged, but that number is constantly moving. But those patients usually are symptomatic and severe enough that they are put inpatient.
So it is growing. That's the bottom line today in that report I saw today. That's just interesting to see why it's growing. Whether they're testing or not, folks are still going to the hospital and it's growing. Okay, thank you.
Mayor, Chief?
Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. So I'm just curious, because the data that we got last week said the percentage capacity for the hospital bed use and type was pretty flat across the board. Is that still the case in Chandler, or will we know more on Wednesday?
Mayor, council member, we will update that document every Wednesday with current information. But we are, when you look at the capacity within the hospital, you're not just looking at COVID-19 cases, you're looking at strokes, you're looking at heart attacks, and those numbers are constantly fluctuating. So each week you're going to see something different, and capacity is really the key, is what you need to look for. Initially, the concern we had was we wouldn't have the healthcare infrastructure to treat COVID-19. There wouldn't be enough capacity, but I think all along we've had enough capacity for this.
Sure. Is it possible that because of the just low numbers of patients, normally hospitals run at 100%, that's how they're profitable, that they're now admitting more COVID-19 patients in order to fill those numbers or get those numbers up?
Councilmember Stewart, I can't answer that. As far as what the hospital is doing, I don't know why they would admit someone who didn't need to be admitted. So I really couldn't answer that.
Okay.
Vice Mayor.
Along those lines, though, do we know if the hospital's also expanding their testing? In that, are we getting designations if it's a COVID patient, again, a positive COVID patient for COVID reasons and symptoms they're admitted for? Or if they happen to be in the hospital for broken leg, a heart attack, and they're testing them because they're in the hospital, and then they do find out that they're possibly, again, positive case, but they have no symptoms and they're there for a different reason. Is there a distinction?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, so from what I understand with speaking to the hospital, the patients that they are testing actually have the CLI signs, which are the fever, difficulty breathing, shortness of breath. And so to say that somebody went in with a broken foot, that they're going to test them for COVID-19, I'm not sure that that's actually occurring right now.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember McClymans.
I don't have a question for Chief.
Okay. Any other questions for the chief? All right. Thank you, Chief.
So one of the things I want to be mindful of is there, I believe the governor even stated, there's a group, 30%, 40% that are very much timid and stepping out. And then there's the group that's saying, let's get back to life. And then there's some in the middle. And, we wrote a letter to the governor saying we would balance safety while trying to look for opening opportunities wherever we can. And so on a city level, this is something we can control ourselves directly. Everything on those lists, I'm supportive of us opening, but do we owe it to ourselves as a city to push safety in mind? And I'm just putting myself in the mindset of the 30% that maybe aren't comfortable opening up. And I'm very supportive of getting the kids out, getting them practicing, playing soccer, and we receive those emails and we hear them loud and clear. But I could imagine their mindset is kids rubbing up against each other and whatnot. Is that good? Is that safe? So are we just going to put out, if we do go the route of opening up, strong encouragement for being safe while getting out and back to life type scenario? So food for thought.
So, Mayor? Question, I guess a comment I would make on that, and I'll get to you, Councilmember Orlando.
No worries.
It does seem like whatever we would do, whether it's with Ramadas, that would probably should be part of the contract. If they're actually going to rent a Ramada from us, whatever the guidelines that we're putting on there, because that would just be part of it, right? You can have a group of X amount in this space, or with athletic fields, again, a strong guideline admonition too of social distancing. And I understand kids might brush up against, but if you're doing practices and drills, those can also, particularly with soccer, a lot of those things don't necessarily involve contact, whether you're shooting at a goalie or dribbling the ball or passing or those kind of things. I don't know what their goals are, but we're not, the conversation isn't about opening leagues. It's practicing so that there would not be large groups of parents on the sidelines cheering on their future soccer professional players and other second grade parents as well. So, I mean, those are the types of things that we could put into place, correct, in terms of a strong admonition of anything that we do. And because again, I do know we will be receiving, I assume that we would be receiving some form or some degree of comments as well, saying that I drove by this park and I've seen people doing this. And I think that's all part of the opening. But I personally agree with Councilmember McClymon's address of both opening where we can and being safe, similar to being consistent with the letter that we sent to the governor. And I think both of those components are important, and there might be some of these areas that can we do both? That I would really also like to continue that conversation. But Councilmember Orlando.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, my concern is safety of employees, because again, just because they're wearing a mask, someone walks in that doesn't have a mask, is COVID, they potentially could catch it. Even that mask doesn't protect the person, it just protects the person from, it protects the person from the other person, let's put it that way, right? Number two, you hit it on the head, the policing of this thing. And the third thing I've been saying all along as well is regionally. I mean, I don't want Chandler, to me, it's not a red badge of courage to be the first one open. I want to open as a regionally. I want to take a hard look at what people are doing. I don't want everyone to come into Chandler and renting a Ramada. And then our police officers have to go out there and potentially be exposed because other folks using our facilities. So, you know, if Tempe's still closed and Mesa's still closed and Gilbert's still closed, they're going to come to Chandler. And that practice will come to Chandler. So, I mean, that's my concern here. We have to work with our other communities and work this thing systematically so that our staff is not overly exposed. Our police officers are not being called just to go because there's 11 people there, and you said it earlier, someone said earlier, there's 40 people, 50 people. We're gonna have to go out there and police that. And what are they gonna tell them? They can't break it up. They can't tell them, you know, you're defying the orders. So I don't understand why we're putting our police officers, our employees, and our citizens in this type of predicament. That's a concern I've had from day one.
So council, there was a list there, I think initially. What's your pleasure and direction to give staff with this? Councilmember Rowe.
Yeah, I think I kind of stated what I thought. I think we should, of course, allow staff some latitude in messaging and licensing and or signing, registering, whatever you want to call it. But I don't see any reason why we can't take that list and make it a go. That's my choice, with safety in mind.
And City Manager or Andy, particularly with reservations addressing at least one of Councilmember Orlando's concerns, are we able to rent Ramadas, for example, just to Chandler residents? I realize that, I mean, I could sign up and have X number of people who don't live in Chandler, but are we at least to address not being a magnet to other communities, are we able to do that?
As I look at this list, generally speaking, you know, when it comes to someone renting a facility or that, we can make sure that it is a Chandler-only resident who is on the reservation through our software. We can verify that. But when I look at libraries, we do have some agreements, regional agreements, that does not allow us to bar those who are not Chandler residents. And we will have, we did see before we closed that as other libraries closed, we did seen an influx of customers from other areas in the valley.
So council, thank you. Let's look at these items. The first one, the centers. The EEC, community centers, Snedeker rec centers. So what type of activities would be going on these other than the casual going in and seeing what's there, particularly for the community center? Would this be reopening small classes or renting large rooms? With that facility piece, what's involved with that?
Yeah, so I'm going to ask Andy to answer your question.
So it kind of goes down with the services down below. We have released our summer schedule. So at this point, we would be preparing for our summer programs that would happen starting in June, the first week of June. So we would be getting the facility ready. We would be working on capacity for those programs. But really at this point, the drop-in is stopped. But we would be looking at probably restarting some of the drop-ins such as table tennis and things like that with a limited number of people.
Okay.
But it's going to be a slow reopening. I mean, obviously we need to schedule staff. We need to notify staff. So there will be kind of a ramping up of the facilities.
So even in renting out these facilities, we're not talking about renting out the community center for a group of 200 to do a wedding reception or a quinceañera. We're really talking about city programming, the services that would use those facilities, not just open for whatever purposes, correct?
At this point, yes.
Okay. Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. You know, to Councilmember Orlando's point, you know, it's extremely important that we do keep our staff safe. Have we implemented those, the partitions and the walls and things like that? And then the other part of the question is, I'm not really excited, especially with item number 1, about limited hours. So what we do is, and we talked about this the last time, what that ended up doing is concentrating the number of people that show up between a shorter window. It happened in New York when they tried to limit the subway times, and the subways were packed. So if we're going to do this, we do it the right way. We open it up the normal amount of time, I think, so that we can, you know, spread out the number of people that are in there at the same time, which goes to the appointment part of it. If we're going to limit the number of people that can be in the building at one time, there has to be some sort of plan to say, okay, how do you come in? What's a good time window for you to be in, et cetera, if we go down that path.
So Councilmember Stewart, correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, but I think mentioning those items were, in essence, people who do belong there. So kids in a program, in a classroom, it's not just, it's not using those centers, it's not just people running in because they can. These would be preset classes in each of those centers, so they would, in essence, be reserved to be there, and we would have an idea of the numbers. Am I correct on that?
Can you pull the
Just talking about the first item of the 3 centers. These would be used for, from what I just heard, would be used for Chandler programs to Chandler residents, not a group that people could say, I've only got 2 hours to be there. Those 2 hours would be determined by the programming that would be going on there.
Okay.
So am I correct?
Yeah, so a good contrast is Tumbleweed Recreation Center versus other facilities. You know, Tumbleweed has gym, they have workout facilities. It's more of a drop-in, come in and work out and leave. These facilities are not as based off a drop-in because there's not the same amenities. We don't have the workout equipment at the community center. So people are going to come because we're hosting an event or a service, a program. So it'd be like, you know, table tennis would be from 10 to 2, and they're going to come during those hours.
Yeah, I get it. It's great. That's good. And so we are going to go through this bullet by bullet then, Mayor?
I'm attempting to do that, so.
Yeah, I got it.
There. Councilmember Huang.
So in this case, just as you described, so that's our own program. In this case, we are not checking people's ID, right?
So when you sign up for our program, we will have the ability through our software that we know where they live. We ask for their address.
Yes.
So we have the ability to know if they live in Chandler. What our practice is that we do open our registration early for Chandler residents only. And then after, right now it's a week, but we can extend that to a couple weeks. And if there is an opening still available, then a non-resident does have the opportunity to register for those programs.
Yes, my question is that necessary to limit the people from outside of the Chandler? If that's our own program, and we do have participants come from other cities like Gilbert or Mesa or Tempe or even Phoenix. So are we going to limit the people who do not live in Chandler?
I think, Councilmember Wong, the philosophy has been if with limited openings that we wanted to be able to serve our community who are taxpayers for these amenities and these facilities first,
Yes.
and to make sure that what we do, that their opportunity is not overridden by others from other communities.
Yeah, I understand. So my question is, so we are going to set up the rule very strictly, only Chandler resident can use our program. Is that the consent of the council or?
Is your direction to offer?
Okay.
I think his presentation was to extend and make sure that Chandler residents who desire to serve with these programs that would be on the summer, again, we're not talking about opening these now, would have the opportunity to have first draft, and whether we extend that or make that exclusive, that is a decision here.
Yes, that's my question. Are we going to make it exclusive?
No.
No.
So Councilmember Orlando, you had a question first. Was it related to this, or
No,
can we answer
city,
this
city
one?
manager. How many shields do we have left to put out to protect our employees?
Mayor, Councilmember Orlando, Deb's telling me there's about 20 left to go up.
And when will those be up?
Mayor and Councilmember Orlando, we're waiting on supplies. We expect to have those very soon, and they go up very quickly. To date, we've installed about 50. We're ordering another 20, but we don't even think we have that many more to go.
So I guess my question, I still say, how we can protect our residents? Are we going to ask folks to wear masks when they come into these facilities? Again, that mask only protects the person that's wearing the mask. If I'm coming in outside these facilities and I don't have a mask on, that employee is vulnerable. How are we going to protect them? We're behind on shields. We're going to give them masks, and yet we're going to have the public come in and utilize these facilities, and that employee is not 100% protected.
Councilmember, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we're opening facilities until the safety protocols are in place, the shields, the things that are there. So I don't think that we're going to be opening anything until those safety protocols, the shields, the plexiglasses are in place.
If you look at this list, there's a lot of confined spaces there, and you're going to have individuals coming in there, and the employee is going to have the mask on. Good for them, but the other person may not. And that's the person going to affect the employee. So are we going to ask them to have masks? We're going to ask them to stay 6 feet away? We're going to have the police officers come down there if it's not being done and cite and write them up? Again, guys, I'm serious. I am dead serious here. I'm not trying to stonewall or anything. I am very much concerned about our city employees. I'm extremely concerned about our police officers getting into an altercation because they're going to try to enforce something that's not even a law. And we just want to open it up.
So Councilmember
It's
Orlando,
frustrating to me at this end of the dais. I'm sorry.
I understand that, but right now we're talking item through item in which asking, can we open these items up? I sincerely doubt that a group of fourth graders, that let's say 8 in a room with 2 instructors, my confidence that a policeman will probably not be called
Mayor,
into that
Mayor,
setting.
don't make
per
light
class.
of my comment, Mayor. Please, that's embarrassing and insulting. That's not what I'm trying to say, a bunch of fourth graders. Please don't do that. I
Councilmember,
respect you too much for that. Come on now.
likewise, what I'm trying to
I'm
say is
talking
that
about if you have a soccer permit going on and you have some residents there, that maybe 10 or 12 parents that are there, they're congregating, that's what I'm talking about. And someone comes by and said, there's 12 parents there chatting away. The police officer goes up there and someone says to them, we're not going to disperse.
So Councilmember, when we get to soccer fields, as opposed to the 3 on the first items, running city programs, I think that's the perfect time for that conversation. I'm trying to ask this council, are there things that we feel that we can be in agreement, have a consensus to safely open? So I'm still on the first item, which would be summer programs starting in June within our 3 facilities. That's the only thing I'm entertaining a conversation about and a decision right now as we go through this list. Vice Mayor.
Yeah, so I concur. I mean, that if we're just focusing bullet 1, environmental education centers, community centers, Senator Rec Center, to do recreational programs per the regular, or per our standard procedures now, which is open to Chandler residents first, and if spots are available, non-Chandler residents, I think that's good. Again, we're keeping these, the limited summer programs, my assumption is we're gonna keep them on the small groups. They're not gonna be 25, 50 people, it's gonna be 10, 12, you know, and even with the smaller groups, again, these classrooms are large enough, they could probably do social distancing, and it's the prerogative of the people that attend to also do social distancing themselves. So, yeah, for bullet point 1, I think that it's applicable, that we should be able to open that up. That's my opinion.
And this is when would these programs start with these particular ones?
Right now, we're advertising all of our summer programs would start the first week of June.
So even tennis, everything that you mentioned, or table tennis would be the 1st of June, not,
We can work on trying to get things reopened as quick as we could in terms of more of the drop-in play. So we could probably do that before June.
Okay.
But the actual programming would start beginning
All
of
right.
June.
So council, on this item?
I would like to clarify though.
All right.
I would
Vice Mayor.
actually want to limit that to, again, just the programs. The drop-in tennis, again, I think there is a possibility there for the large congregations. Again, a lot of people getting together, anything drop-in does, again, invite large groups. So in my opinion, we should, again, for these programs, be reserved down to just the designated programs only. That's my opinion.
All right, council, looking for a consensus here. Thumbs up on opening the 3 rec renters for summer programs. Yes or no?
Yes, I'm for opening, and I also agree with Mark Stewart's idea that not limited hour. We want to open, we just open. But we do need to practice the CDC guidelines, all those things, and we also want to encourage the participants to wear masks.
So concerning hours, again, these are programs, so people are only going to be there for a program. And as long as the programs go, those are the hours that would be run, not,
Yes.
there wouldn't just be people showing.
Okay, yeah.
So,
But we do need to practice the CDC guideline. We need to limit the number of the participants, and we want to encourage them to wear masks. I don't know if we want to mandate it or not, but I guess there probably some resistance if we mandate it, but we do want to encourage them. And so.
got 2 yeses on this for opening these facilities. Council, any others? Councilmember Stewart?
I was gonna pass to the next one, because this one's a difficult one, because I'm inclined to think a bunch of kids in a room all day long in a group, that's the challenge that we're faced with. I'm more interested in outdoor activities and things like that. I think we started with the most difficult, with the $1,000 question on Jeopardy first, and we should go to the $200 one.
Andy, how long are these programs run per classroom? And then the cleaning between, so are these all day or are these?
So we will have some all-day programs such as our summer camp program. But the other programs are, typically last an hour, 45 minutes to an hour, just depends on what they are, what program they're, if they are a karate class or, summer camp or a nature walk, things like that, just depends.
Okay.
And to that point, like schools are out, right? They're not going back to school as it stands today. We're essentially starting a classroom. So I'm going to lean on, let's see what Camille and her group does with school before we decide to put school in session with summer camps and things like that. That's just my take. That's why I think this is the hardest one of the entire list. And to be fair, Mayor, nobody's seen this list yet. We don't have a deck in front of us. So we're vetting through this on the fly. So I'd appreciate a little bit of latitude if we ask a ton of questions, or at least if I do.
I think I'm giving
No, you are. I'm
tremendous amount of
just
latitude.
I'm just getting a little winded here, so.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know that this was sent, many perhaps didn't have a chance. I saw it in my mail slot at 4, but this was also part of what was given to us earlier. So we're having a conversation about what do we want to open. There's no pressure, in my opinion, to open anything or everything. We're making the decisions. So,
Mayor.
council member.
So another recommendation I have, I already mentioned several times, but I do wish the council and staff take it a little bit serious. It's about the thermometer. It's just put on the head and you know what kind of temperature the participant is. And some kids, they are very healthy, they are very energetic, and they may already have infected, but they didn't know. But one of the symptoms is temperature. If we are not able to screen 100% up, but we can screen some up. If thermometer, yeah.
All right, so council members, I'm hearing a couple things. I'm hearing openings, adding thermometers, adding masks. I'm hearing openings, let's do it. I'm hearing, I don't want to open. And I'm looking for a consensus with this. If you want, we can revisit this upon the other things, but we're not required to open any of these, and we can visit these at a later time as well. But if we are going to do summer programming in these facilities, today is probably the timely decision on when we would want to do so. We could also push back summer programming, I suppose, but this is the conversation to open in these facilities or summer programming. Councilmember McClemens.
We don't know for sure, but I would imagine the 15th or the 16th, there's a good probability that there may be some allowance for reopening of gyms. And so if gyms are able to open in some capacity, wouldn't it make sense that these programs would be able to open in some capacity, maybe even in mimicked guidelines? And so we could almost make the decision, let's wait until the 16th to see what's said about the gyms, and if we can mimic the programs for these with whatever that is, to me, it's the same, and we could make the decision based off of that. Food for thought.
Thank you, Mayor. And that's a good point, because then it goes back to regionalism. Opening everything up at one time, right? So that no community is being forced to handle the other sister communities for personnel. So that's a good point.
So council, listening to you two in particular, one of the things we could do is say, if the governor makes an announcement to open gyms or similar style facilities, upon those, we will fall in line with any of these that would also line up. That would affect the rec centers, that would affect potentially the clubhouses. I don't know, we can talk about outdoor fields, but certainly the indoor ones, we could follow lead with that and make that just follow the governor's announcement. City manager.
Mayor, appreciate that recommendation, all of you. I know this is a very sensitive issue and no doubt about that. From where we sit, I think it might be preferable to actually wait and see what the governor does do, and then maybe bring this back even next week after we kind of know on a number of these things. Otherwise, I would hate to take direction. It'd be different. We're back anyway, and then we give the public a whole idea of varying ideas in terms of what we're going to do on those facilities. If there's something particular that council is good to go and we can go ahead and get moving on, maybe that might be a direction to focus rather than trying to guess what the governor might or might not do. Just a suggestion.
Well, I would also ask council if the governor opens these in such a way that regionally says that these types of facilities can be utilized with these guidelines, can we give staff direction to open them and work it there? And we can pull out individual things now, Councilmember Stewart, but I'm just wondering if the governor says gyms are good, can we then say, okay, our EEC, any of our small classrooms, that would be more of a boutique style gym, are those types of things. Can we open concurrently with the governor's direction and give city manager that direction tonight?
And Mayor, I'm okay with that because I'm assuming he'll put pools in there. And the facility that goes along with the pools, again, only assumption. And I'm okay with that. Again, I'm still worried about staff being an employee. It takes away, well, potentially may not take away the police officer's issue if there's still CDC guidelines, but at least a portion of that is covered under a regional approach. So I have no problem with that.
Okay. Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, we just took an entirely different path to this entire discussion. We were talking about each bullet items. We didn't get past the first one, and now we're talking about a regional program when we know clearly that when you look at this COVID crisis, you can't look at it on a global scale. You need to look at it per community, per city, per county, per state, per nation. So to go to with a regional plan is not a good idea. It's a cop-out, and I don't know why we're here if we're going to do that. You know, we're looking at this data for the first time. I know we've gone over this before. There are things that we can open up in the city right now that I think are safe for our children. They're safe for our families. We have the capacity. We always go back to that number one thing. Do we have the capacity to treat people if they do get sick? You cannot social distance this virus away. Just will not. It will not happen. We can wait for 18 months for a vaccine. If we're going to do that, then we need to start talking about different subjects besides this. We need to talk about shutting things down entirely. So we need to come up with a plan for the reason that we're here today, which is to open up services so people can start exercising, so we can start lowering the domestic violence, so we can start lowering the car theft, so we can put people back to work and get back on our feet. So there is a way to let the rope out a little bit, and that's why we're here today. I don't want to start talking about a new regional strategy. There are parks, so I want to go to I'd like to go to maybe the next item, or at least let's start with one of the things I think we can get open, which is athletic fields for youth practices.
Councilmember, I want to finish this one because what I'm asking is when the governor says Arizona, Maricopa County, you can open gyms with these guidelines, I'd like to recommend that we open those facilities that are indoor that we've already proven we have capacity and everything else. I'm just looking for the governor to be the trigger that would then also serve with our neighbors and others to do the same, rather than everyone coming to Chandler if we would make the statement today for this first item. And we will have the conversation with outdoors, I promise you. But I'm asking, are there some of these, whether it's indoor, the tennis clubhouse, the libraries and the museum and other facilities, that we feel confident that with proper safety protocol, with screens in place, with our guys being covered, with other communities not flocking to Chandler because they will have their own possibilities, that the indoor facilities we open along with gymnasiums. That's my recommendation or thought here when the governor so says, and our city manager and parks director says we have safety protocol in place. That's what I'm asking.
Yes, Mayor.
Councilmember.
Yes, I'm all for opening, but with the precaution, with those precautions, with also the safety measurements, what should I say? With all those safety measures there. Yeah.
Okay. So I think I have 1, 2, 3, 4 that are going on that direction with the governor's release on these things. Is there any reservations that strongly stand out? We're still probably talking about June here. And I anticipate the governor may make an announcement related to this week. Certainly because we have May 15th looming in front of us. Councilmember McClemens.
So to be clear, when I made that suggestion, I was making that suggestion specifically for the first line item.
Great.
Because I felt like that is closely encapsulated to what you would expect in a gym. And I also expect that there's a high likelihood that he might make a move on it within the week. And so we're making a decision to get that going within the next week, specific to that line item. And then we can still go through the rest. So I'd be in support of that. Line item 1.
All right, I have we're good? Councilmember Stewart?
I'm going to defer.
Okay. Would the same apply to the tennis center clubhouse? What's the interaction going in there? I've never been to this one. Is it just people renting things? Is it easy to protect employees? This is reservations for the courts?
Yeah, so this is the main entrance into the courts. So what we've done now is we've opened up the side gate so people can just walk in and out. We would close the side gate and then people would have to go through the clubhouse. And that would ensure that courts are reserved. We would allow them to rent the ball machine, which is a very popular item. And it just allows us to know who's in the facility and who's coming and going. So that's really all it is. It's limited, it's short-lived. We can make sure that people aren't, lounging in the center.
Okay. Counsel?
Do it.
All right. Yes on that one. Number 3, athletic fields. Okay, we got to know there. Okay. Athletic field use for youth league practices only, with directions of giving social distancing, et cetera, et cetera. Counsel, what's your feel on that one?
Should these groups, if they are doing, do they have to be limited to under 10 based on CDC guidelines, based on where we're at in the federal phase? I don't think we really have a state phase, but are you seeing that as a practice, or do they have their own, some of the soccer clubs, the baseball teams, they have their own sort of rules that have been delivered to them, right?
Yeah, thank you through the mayor to Councilmember Stewart. Yes, each sport league has a governing body, and each of those governing bodies have issued declarations on how how they could be played, whether they've canceled the sport for a time, or they said, you can do just these very specific activities. I know that is the case in soccer. The governing body has said, here's how you can still do soccer following CDC guidelines.
Thank you, Andy. So I would lean to, if they're using, those tools to direct their clubs on how to be safe and effective, that's essentially where we're going to go as a community and where we're going to go as a country, is that we were going to have to rely on self-governance for people to get this right. We cannot micromanage this entire process. So I'm supportive of opening those tonight.
All right, moving this way. Councilmember McClements?
I'm supportive of them opening with safe guidance. I don't think there's a dramatic difference of kids playing in the park. I actually think it's safer with guidance with kids playing in the park. So for that vernacular, I'm all for opening it.
I agree. Open them up.
And you have a copy of their guidelines of which they're saying they're going to be following?
Yes, we will have a copy of that.
Okay.
Certainly.
All right, very good. Councilmember Wong?
Yes, my position is all the same. They can all be open with those safety precaution and with those CDC guidelines and everything.
Right.
That I have been consistent with that one.
All right. Councilmember Rowe? Yes, sir. Councilmember Orlando?
That soccer organization, is that a for-profit or a nonprofit organization?
I believe they're a nonprofit.
They're a nonprofit. Okay, you want to confirm that? Okay. And what are the guidelines that they put out?
So this is from their governing body, USA Soccer. It's the guidelines. Basically, it has so many people on the field. I believe it is only 8 people on the field at a time with a coach. And then they have specific drills that they recommend that keep the social distancing at a maximum. They don't allow for scrimmaging and things like that, specific to soccer.
Yeah, I'll be no.
All right, moving along. Park Ramadas, amenities not in the governor's executive orders. Again, I think we can determine what the size is and post, have them sign, I will follow the social distancing guidelines, correct, on those? Okay.
We can, and just to be clear, the Ramadas are currently open. They're
Yeah.
just not reservable. So they are being used.
Sure.
So I have a question on this one.
Yes, Vice Mayor. City manager. Yeah.
City manager, yes. I thought the part of the governor's guidelines, though, was that the Ramadas were part of his closures on his executive order, that they were all to be closed as part of park amenities, and he did not open those up with his policing. Are we correct?
Not that I know of, not on the list I have.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, Ramadas are not included in his executive order of facilities we can't use. So we're free to use them.
All right. I say open them up.
All right. Open. Feel like I'm at a commercial here. Yes and yes? No? Yeah. All right. So yes on those. Libraries, next level. So this would actually be allowing people into the libraries. That would be spacing out computer use. And how would we continue to, if people are actually meandering, how would we then continue to look after our employees, clean, et cetera? How would all that happen?
Thank you, Mayor. So we will have a capacity limit of the amount of people that can be in the library at a single time. Right now, we're looking at doing what is our current capacity level from the fire department and doing 25% of that to try to keep the social distancing. Libraries are a challenge, I'll be honest with you, because you have people who come and stay from opening till close in the libraries, and we won't have the ability to move them or say your time is up here. We can limit their time on a computer, but their actual time within the libraries. So this will be a challenge for our staff, but we're up for it and ready to make it happen. Our hope is that through arranging some furniture, reducing the amount of places people can sit, that will encourage people to come in, do their business, and then move on with their day. But that is a challenge that we have in libraries, is that people do come and do stay all day there.
Councilmember Rowe, then Councilmember Huang.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick question for you. So somebody comes in at open and they stay comfortable and cool for the whole day until it closes. Are we not able to communicate, enforceable or not? Couldn't we communicate that so that other people can enjoy the facility? We ask you to stay not more than 90 minutes or 2 hours. I mean, I would tell you, I think that while we don't want to micromanage, we clearly are doing that. And decisions are made across the city every day, all day long, about whether somebody should get a Band-Aid for their boo-boo or whatever. So there is a certain amount of trusting the people that we have working for us. So what about that question?
I'll defer over to City, please.
If I may, Mayor, Councilmember Rowe, we can always ask people to be mindful of the time and to leave when their time is up. The challenge is enforcing them. If they are not violating any rules, they just choose to stay there, it is very difficult for us to remove them from a public facility that is open to the public. So that would be a challenge that I'm not sure we'd want to take on. But yes, we can ask them and remind them that, you know, we're trying to limit the time for individuals so that more people can come through.
Mayor, okay, so the challenge is that we'd like you to leave in 90 minutes. I'm not leaving. Okay, thank you, have a nice day. I'm not really looking for enforcement. In fact, I don't know that we've really clarified with the chief, is some of the social distancing, has this been any kind of an issue? Have we had a big issue, enforcement issue as far as going out and breaking people apart? Do we have a real problem before we go down this road?
Chief.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Councilmember Rowe, to answer your question, we have been called and we've been able to respond and help inform and educate. And to this date, we've been able to gain compliance. We have not issued any citations or made any arrests for violation of laws, which are different than guidelines, obviously. We have no standing to enforce any type of guideline. We enforce laws. So to this day, as of today, we've had great cooperation from our community in a very general sense, yes.
So that's my question, and it doesn't sound like there's a hardship. And if we have some guidelines, if people say, I'm not leaving the library, well, okay, have a nice day. Isn't that correct? We're not gonna go and take somebody out in handcuffs if they decide not to leave the library after 90 minutes. Is that correct?
That is not a violation of the law. There could be other activities that may constitute a violation of the law that we would enforce, but in that one particular scenario, that's not a violation of the law.
So, I don't, anyway, I respectfully disagree that we couldn't ask people to be kind and leave after 90 minutes or 2 hours or 2.5 hours or whatever it is. I think we have every right to be able to say, here's a card, please follow these rules, and we'd love you to leave so other people can come in and enjoy our nice facilities.
And if I may be clear, Mayor, Councilmember Rowe, I agree. We can ask them, we can give them the guidelines. We can ask them if they've stayed beyond their limit, if they'd be willing to leave. It's just the enforcement part that I would have legal concerns about.
Perfect. Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
So with this one, again, due to, again, confinement, but talking about staff, like Councilmember Orlando talks about, in my opinion, I think we need to drop this one into the governor's also when it opens up regionally, when some of our other cities, and maybe postponing this one again a week or whatever until we hear more from a wider array. Because again, I can see this one being a place for a lot of
Thanks, Chief.
people getting together. So that's my opinion.
Councilmember Orlando, then Councilmember Wong.
I was gonna just say that this would fall under the building structure and not bird. And again, if someone's not leaving, again, it just shows that there's individuals that are gonna be selfish. And okay, that's nothing against the law, but again, that person outside and standing out there because we're only limited 25% can't get in, and it's a concern. So I agree, if we could just nicely say in the move alongs as a courtesy so everybody else could enjoy the library, I mean, that's something we'll have to see, but I agree.
Councilmember Wong.
So limited the time of the service, I don't know if you can really enforce it or not. And in terms of COVID-19, if somebody already got infected, well, they stay there 5 minutes can still infect other people. So this is my comment about Councilmember Rhodes. And what I originally want to say is, if we want to open a library, we probably will need to reduce some service. For example, our computer is very close. We may need to close each computer one after the other, so that we can follow the social distancing guideline. As I just mentioned, I'm all for opening, but we need to have precautions. So if we cannot do that, then no opening.
Councilmember, I think that was already planned to be in place in terms of
Yes.
Reducing the amount of computers
Yes.
and through furniture where people, that they
Yes.
will be distanced from others?
Yes, and also the sanitizing. I'm very concerned about those keyboards, and yeah. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is there's a wave of sentiment saying, let's defer this till line up with gyms. Is that a correct sentiment?
I don't mind.
All right.
Yep.
Councilmember Stewart.
What services are the library providing right now? Please.
Yeah, through the mayor, Councilmember Stewart. So right now, you can go online and you can place a hold for a book or a DVD or whatever. And then you can drive to the library and pick it up and then you can, check it out. So in addition, that's the in-person. But we also have all of the online virtual, so you can do, books, music, movies, all those things online right now as well, digitally.
Okay, so we have a number of underprivileged youth that use our computer labs and things like that, right, at the library, and people that don't have the luxury of having laptops and computers at home. what are they doing right now to be able to use computers and be able to do the same things that we're fortunate enough to be able to do?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Stewart, I don't know that I can necessarily answer that question. I do know that the school has given out technology for students who need it. We have had people using our Wi-Fi in the parking lot, which has been great, and we've encouraged that. That's been fine. But again, that hasn't been a huge request at this time to us.
Well, it's good news about the schools providing those tools, and so that leads me to be inclined to agree with Vice Mayor Lopez. Thank you.
So I think we have a consensus on this. So to delay this and then open with whether 25% social distancing, but whether that announcement is tomorrow for the 16th, but just not open this week with that. I'm correct? Okay. Museum and Vision Gallery facilities. They're not programs. They're not greatly attended, but it's an amenity that we could easily restrict people's attendance in there on both of these. What's your favor? Pleasure, Council. Councilmember McClymons.
We can, in limited capacity, people can go and eat right now. And we can control capacity into these facilities. I'd be supportive in that vernacular.
Okay.
Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah, I would agree. I was planning on lumping this into also and advocating for lumping it into with the governor's future edict with gyms, but these are a different kind of a venue. You typically don't touch, and there's not a lot of touching going on in the museum of the items, and never mind, I'm going down that path. So I think in these ones that, again, being able to control capacity, being able to limit the number of people in there, I think it's pretty low risk to facility or to our employees. So I think that we should be able to open this up, in my opinion.
Moving over to this side. Yeses, nos, yes?
Until they open the pools up in the gyms.
Okay, I'm hearing others on this side say they feel we can open this immediately. I'm in that camp. Councilmember Rowe or Huang?
Perhaps this is the easiest of them all.
Yeah.
It's a definite yes.
Okay. Councilmember Huang? All right, so we have 6 yeses, 1 delay on this one. That's okay. With, again, safety precautions, limited occupancy. Services, summer recreational programs with small groups. We've somewhat addressed that already with the facilities. I think that one's covered. Center for the Arts, small groups. Same as, when are programming anticipated to start now? Kim Moyer. What does this mean in detail?
Mayor, for the Center for the Arts Small Events, we would be talking about children's programming through our kids' camps, and it would start the 3rd week of June and run through to the end of the season until school started back again.
So 5 weeks out starting programs. This would allow the ability to take reservations to Chandler residents first and then see if there's any additional openings, correct?
Mayor, we feel comfortable with this because we would be able to keep it at groups of 8 and under and be able to still keep the 6-foot distancing between all the children and the staff.
Okay, Council?
Good for opening it up.
Yes, 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 yes. Okay, on this side? I think we're yes. Okay, so groups of 10 and under with including staff, social distanced. Okay.
Mayor.
Council member.
So this small group, this idea, and can that also be applied to the Veterans Oasis groups and the events that's being put on through our rec programs that Andy's working on, that we kind of said no to? So we're going to do this, but we're not going to do that. We're going to go to Walmart, but we can't go to
perhaps for Councilmember Stewart, perhaps one of the biggest differences is this is 5 weeks out starting, as opposed to 3 weeks out, which will probably be covered by the governor's executive orders, but we're really giving permission to start RSVPs And we're 5 weeks out, so we're talking.
Okay, so it's a timeline thing, but they're not really covered under the EO. These are things that we decide. So I get that we're trying to lean on the EO, but some of the problems that I think the community's had, and I've been listening, excuse me, is that there's no consistency in what you can go to Walmart, but you can't go to a farmer's market. You can go to the Vision Gallery, but you can't go to this. And so I'm just trying to get some consistency here. That's the purpose of the question. So if we can do 8 at the small group that's 5 weeks out, so in 5 weeks, so we just push the events back for the, so can we make that addendum?
Sure, that,
Okay,
making
great.
sure that the governor's has opened things up or whatever.
Super, thank you.
Okay. All right, moving on. Public housing rec programs. Is this a similar thought with this, and what's the timeline? City manager.
Yeah, so Mayor, these are more of an ongoing program that we have with our public housing sites. Anyway, so it'd be totally up to the council if you're ready to start those back up, or again, we can wait till we have more direction from the governor. But definitely we would, as in all of these cases, follow CDC guidelines and appropriate protection for everyone involved.
Okay, council?
Mayor.
Vice Mayor?
What is the attendance like then? Is it just, is it a one-on-one program or is it groups?
Yeah, Mayor, Vice Mayor, it is small groups of kids that participate in this, and I think it kind of varies depending on who might be at their residence at the time these are being offered. But definitely, we would have to keep it to, we've tried to keep all of these to 8 or under in kids and 2 staff, and to make the 10 in all of these areas.
Okay.
So we would work towards that same goal here.
And you said they're ongoing, so if we were to say, okay, start them, is this another one where it's 2 weeks away, or is this 5 weeks away to start?
That would be up to mayor and council, but certainly they have been shut down for quite a while. If you want to wait and run these simultaneously when we start the others, we can do that as well.
I would recommend that, in my opinion.
All right, recommendation to proceed. Other council? Councilmember Rowe.
Yeah, Mayor, just one, city manager, these programs that we're talking about right now, this one on the list, we're using our own staff. There's no outside contract.
Mayor, Councilmember Rowe, that is correct. We have housing recreation staff that provides these programs.
All right, I'm in, thank you.
Okay. I'm hearing 2 yeses so far. Yes? Consistent? Okay. Okay, that's 3, 4. Councilmember Stewart? All right. Moving on, customer service counters by appointment only. Where would these be, city manager?
Yes, Mayor, so these would be development services, through management services for utility billing, in neighborhood resources for some of their counter issues, but these would be where in our plan that we have current counters where people can come in and do a transaction. We would do that by appointment only if council were willing to go ahead and begin that, or we can begin it next week. Timing is up to you, but we are able to do it.
So we have all the safety protocol in place and the PPE ready to do these, to open up to public services. Okay.
Yes, Mayor, and if there is one that's being delayed, we will delay opening it. So we're not going to open it unless those safety protections are there, but mostly across the city, as Deb said, those are already in place.
All right. Councilmember McClymons. Oh, okay. Thought you were Councilmember Stewart.
I think that makes sense to move forward on that.
Okay.
I mean, yeah.
All right. Yes, yes, yes. Great. All right. That's a yes on that one. Code enforcement in residential areas with notices mailed. This would be the next step of code enforcement if someone there's still safety or whatever hazards, health or safety hazards. And this would be what? Connecting, calling, knocking on a door? What would this be?
Mayor, council, right now we have just the health and safety code violations that we're actually pursuing. With this would actually start back code enforcement of residential areas. So that is the point here. there would be no contact or anything. It's just, is the council ready to actually start issuing code citations against the residences? That is this question.
All right. Vice Mayor.
So to clarify again, we never stopped on the health and safety.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, actually, we did for that period of time, but under phase one, that started back. This would be, or is council ready to give staff the direction to go forward with actually issuing citations on residences?
So yes, I'm good with that one.
Okay. Councilmember Wong.
So if we say yes, that means it will be enforced tomorrow or until June?
Mayor, Councilmember Wong, a number of those cases just depends on where they were already in the system. So if we were everywhere except issuing a citation, then we would probably have to go back and re-inspect to make sure it hasn't been cleaned up, and then proceed through our typical process before issuing an actual citation. We always try to get voluntary compliance before issuing any citations. So we would work that first.
So the inspection is already ongoing already, right?
No, sir,
Or
not
we
on
stop?
residences at this point. At this point, it has been stopped. So that is the question, if you're ready for us to start that again.
Okay.
Okay. Councilmember Stewart, then Councilmember McClemens.
Yeah, I'd like to see that start again, but we could issue a little bit of leeway, just some verbal leeway, so we can give our residents some, everybody's stressed, and just give them a little bit of a break out of the gates.
Certainly.
I'd piggyback on that as well. There's a lot of people that have lost jobs and whatnot, and to provide some leeway in time before we start.
So I'm hearing a graceful yes on this
Yes,
side.
a graceful
so-
yes.
All right, everyone's good, all right. Household hazardous waste collection appointments.
So again, we are where we can provide the proper PP&E. We did halt household hazardous waste collection appointments, but we are ready to start those back if council is.
I'm surprised that we stopped it.
All right, we're good. What else, city manager? Slide 2.
All right. Mayor, may I get the indulgence to make sure that we can go, let me go back quickly and summarize what I
Please.
have gotten. So on the Environmental Education Center, the Community Center, Snedeker Rec Center, we will hold until the governor opens for gyms, as well as, let's make sure I've got it. Okay. Yes, the summer recreation programs as well, right? So, but tennis center clubhouse, we will open. Athletic fields, yes. Park armadas and amenities, yes. The museum and vision gallery, yes. And libraries, we will hold until governors in the gyms on that. For services, summer rec programs with small groups under the 8 with the 2 additional staff. Center for the Arts, same. Public housing, same. Customer service counters was a yes. Code enforcement, yes, but with definite latitude on those residences to get voluntary compliance and start back household hazardous waste. Did I get that?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. So if we can get the presentation back up. All right, so the next one here, and this may be already answered, but nonetheless, things that are still covered is Tumbleweed Recreation Center. As you are aware, it is our big gym. The pools are still covered under the guidelines as far as opening pools, as well as what is listed there on playgrounds, splash pads, basketball courts, and restrooms. So I just want to make sure to reiterate that for everyone. And then Dana can speak to the services around passports.
Mayor Harkey, members of the council, yes, we're still no word on when the Department of State is going to open up passport services. They're not processing any passports, any applications that come in, they're just sitting on desks, and they've asked that we not send anything, so we're just waiting to get the word on when they'll open again.
Any questions on those? Okay. All right, the last thing, again, to get direction on is around the city council meetings. So back in April when we were here, council direction is that the meeting tonight and the one on Thursday would remain closed, except unless you had a particular thing to speak on. And in April, gave you a couple of options, and you asked that we return at this point to see the council's direction on what you want to do for the second set of meetings in May and going forward after that, if that's something you want to give direction on. Option one basically is what we're doing at the moment, which is collecting those comment cards submitted to the city clerk, and then limiting attendance to speakers that are on agenda items only. Or option two would be to, basically we would have all of the chairs tagged with a maximum of 50 people in the audience. Safety measures, signage, social distancing, disinfection protocols would all be in place. And we would still have the broadcast of these meetings out in the lobby for anyone that might be overflow as part of these meetings. Wanted to get council direction on your next set of council meetings.
And it's my understanding that planning and zoning have already, in essence, they're operating under number 2, option 2, is that correct?
Mayor, members of council, per council direction at the last meeting, they are allowing people into the council chambers, and they are supposed to be following social distancing guidelines.
Okay. Council, what are your thoughts?
I'm good for option 2.
2? 2? All right. All right, yes, option 2.
All right. Along with that, Mayor and Council, your scheduled public appearances, what are the thoughts about scheduled public appearances at this point?
So these would be both people speaking in a scheduled way as well as this speaking of service recognitions or just scheduled public appearances?
Probably direction on either of those, Mayor. So we have obviously service recognitions or retirement recognitions. Those are all staff driven. Those could be easily delayed, being that it's staff. Secondly would be anybody else that has been or requested to be invited to receive either a proclamation or something like that at a scheduled public appearance. Just wanting to see where council is on that at this point.
Council, Vice Mayor.
I'd say if they're asking to come, I'm good for letting them in, and then same with the employees. It's leave to their discretion. If they feel comfortable enough to come and do a public appearance, let them. And if they're not comfortable, then they get the private session.
Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. I agree with Vice Mayor Lopez that, if somebody's put their time in 25, 30 years or that are retirement, they deserve to be able to get their picture with the mayor. Right?
Thank you. Other comments? Councilmember Wong.
I would like to have a compromise that we allow the people who ask to come if they want to speak. But I do have a little bit concern about opening 50 people, no selections. Yeah. So I'm in between option 1 and option 2. So if the people who specific ask to come, or they need to be recognized, or they want to talk, then we allow them to come in. But for the general public, probably not.
Well, I think with option 2 that we already said is that we were good with that. This is specifically that someone who is here or who would like to address the council, or because we all have said yes on that one already with the 50. This would just be if they're here, they could address us.
No, the people, if the people outside, they can still stay outside. Option 2 is we allow only 50 to come in, but if it's 650, they will stay outside. But my idea is no 50 or 10 or 30, only the people who have business to do with the council will be coming.
So you want to put a definition of who the 50 are that are here? Or who speaks?
Yes, the people who want to speak, or the people who need to be recognized, or they have a reason that they must be here. Yeah. Not the general public, right? Yeah,
You're back to option one. in
one
essence.
with some kind of losing ground, yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Rowe.
Thank you, Mayor. If somebody wants to come down here and stand at that podium and talk to us, that would be great. They would be welcome. I'd love it.
Councilmember Orlando.
Yeah, I'm still a little fuzzy on the service recognitions. Are you saying we would not do those or control those? And the rest of the public hearing, as far as the agenda item or unscheduled public appearance, that's something we would allow the 50 people. Is that what I'm hearing? Okay.
Mayor, Councilmember Orlando, yes, every time we do service recognitions, to be honest, there are a lot more, far exceeding the number that actually want or wish to come and be recognized at council. But if they wish to come and be recognized, we would have them come in, do their recognitions, and then they would leave, so.
So we are going to allow service recognitions based
That's-
upon the
Question
individual.
for
We're just at-
council.
That's still a question right now.
Oh, okay, that's what I'm asking. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so, I know that's important for service recognition, but normally they bring their families and friends, and that could be pretty tight in some cases, especially if you have 2 or 3 of them. So what do we do? Flow them in, flow them out? I mean, logistics of that concerns me a little bit.
Mayor, Councilmember Orlando, it could, depending on what else is on the agenda. We're still looking at a maximum of 50 within the chambers. I think that we can actually seat with CDC guidelines. So you are correct. It would just depend on what's on the agenda that evening, if we run into an issue or not.
So if we had things like, honoring the Girl Scouts or something for, blowing through their cookie number or something like that, would we then postpone those later on? Or allow them to come? I guess I'm just still, look, let me put it this way. I have no problem with the public coming in, doing the business of the city council meeting if there's agenda item. I guess I'm just trying to figure out the logistics if we start adding these other entities, service recognitions, recognizing this person for, winning the world championship in underwater submarine, something. Could those then be put off? Or the monthly, we have monthly meetings where there's the, red ribbon of the month meeting or teachers of the month, those type of things. We put those off. I'm just trying to figure out what really is essential business to the city to, in other words, keep the attendance at a minimum versus some of the things that are nice to do.
Mayor, Councilmember Orlando, all excellent points. A lot of those are nice to-dos. The actual business of the city would be someone here to actually speak on an agenda item or represent their interest on something you are about to vote on. That would be the actual business of the council. So it would be up to the council. If you want to push those off and wait another month or what have you, we can certainly do that on those recognitions.
And Mayor, that's the issue I'm struggling with. I mean, if I have an agenda item, should that person take precedent of coming in here versus someone that's being honored for the month, then what do we do with those people? Do we leave them outside? Do we bring them in? Do we show? I mean, I don't, logistically, it may be a concern, but I don't know. I mean, I'm just.
If I may. So,
Vice Mayor.
I mean, I think we'd be able to handle the discretionally, knowing how many are going to be coming in. If we've got a big contentious item, I mean, we would let those that are here to speak on an item, and if the family members that are here, again, it's televised outside. Unfortunately, they may not be able to be in the room, or have one of them come in, take pictures, and then they would be able to vacate. Again, I mean, I think we need to have these, again, like Councilmember Stewart said, I mean, these people are staff that is dedicated so much to the city. I mean, they should have the opportunity to come up before the council and the mayor and have their picture taken and be recognized in public. And I think we can get around that. And the other one that always does bother me is that they may be a group of 5 or 6 sitting together. They just probably came from a car all sitting next to each other. But for perspective, we probably would seat them separately here and understand that. But I don't see why it should be an issue to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. I can't speak it, but I can do it.
So council, it sounds like everyone is in agreement for special appearances in terms of if someone wants to address the council. I've heard everyone say yes to that. Is there the possibility, and I'll get you too, is there the possibility, at least in the near future, to add these types of things, not just on a Monday, but on a Thursday? That, so that we could double up and therefore also dilute the use of special recognitions or anything? So at least until the near future, is there any reason why we can't do that and therefore utilize when we do gather in a double sense? City managers or any?
Mayor, council members, we could certainly look to post those and try to basically work that where we might have service recognitions or retirements on one night, other things on the other night, based on, we know, I mean, generally we have a pretty good idea if we've got an item that's going to draw a lot of attention, and we can try to work that and manage it accordingly.
Okay. Council, would you be okay with that?
I just want to make sure.
Great, okay.
I don't care.
Councilmember McClymons and then Councilmember Stewart.
I think you just presented a great example that I think we have enough brain power in this room to safely navigate the management of people on a case-by-case scenario until we get to a new life. And so I think what you suggested and what we can do will be great going forward.
Great. Councilmember Stewart.
I was just going to say, great idea. You know, I like you guys and I like staff, but one of the things I really look forward to sitting up here is watching the awards and recognitions. I love it. I love the families. So I'm really glad we can still do that.
Great, okay. So this might eliminate us bringing in the entire Chandler football team, but we can still honor individuals and groups and maybe push them back. All right. All right. All right. City manager, moving on.
Mayor, council, that was it.
All right, council. With that, closing our work session.